question, but I don't know if you can hear me. I believe Mr. Pennington is logging in now.
Yes, he said he was.
Excellent.
Oh, I was thinking Mr. LaForge. I'm sorry.
No, I'm talking about Mr. Pennington. He's getting ready to
Okay.
log in too.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, well, it's 1:30, so let's get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission for Thursday, March 11th. Being held by video conference, obviously. I have a few announcements to make before we get started. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting will be stopped and reconvened once the connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration on today's agenda will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting, which will be held March 25th at 1:30 p.m. That meeting is also scheduled to be held by video conference. The agenda and documents for today's meeting are located at okc.gov. You can find them there. For anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item or to speak under citizens to be heard, hopefully you've previously notified staff by phone or email or by signing up online. If you have not, I will provide an opportunity for anyone to speak on a specific item during that item's discussion, and I'll call on you at the appropriate time and give you instructions at that point. If you call in after your item has been heard, you will also be allowed to speak under citizens to be heard should you wish to do so, which will be at the end of today's meeting. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to comment. I will hold those comments to that length of time so we can ensure that everyone who wants to be heard gets an opportunity. When you call in, obviously your line is being muted. Please keep your lines on mute until you're recognized to speak. To unmute your phone, you push *6. To mute your phone back, you push *6 again. To raise your hand, in order to be recognized, you can press *9. That will also lower your hand. So it's just *6 or *9 if you're joining us by phone. If you're on your computer, you can raise your hand by pushing Alt-Y, or the space bar is what you would use to mute or unmute. So if you want to raise your hand, Alt-Y. To mute or unmute, you use the space bar. I ask that all participants except the commission members do keep their lines on mute. Commission members are allowed to speak or ask questions at any point or comment at any time during the meeting. Please remember that only one person can be heard, so if more than one person speaks, we're not able to hear everybody. And in the event that there is the absence of a commissioner at any point, I'll do a roll call every 15 minutes. If you're joining us by phone today, I want you to know that I am monitoring the commissioners to ensure that we're complying with our video conference requirements. Commissioners, as a reminder, all commissioners have agreed to participate via video conference unless you specify to the contrary. As a result of that, if you are going to step away from your computer for any reason, I ask that you just interrupt me or whomever is speaking at the time and let them know that you're stepping away for a few minutes so that we can start that clock. So with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And our first order of business is to receive the minutes from the February 25th, 2021 meeting. If there's no discussion on those minutes, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we receive the minutes of the February 25th meeting.
Okay, I have a motion and I'm sure I'll get a second online. I do have a second by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes when available.
Hinkle's a yes.
Hinkle, you voting with us by voice today?
Confirmed.
Okay, I'll call on you. So Commissioner Hinkle's vote is a yes. We should have all the votes cast.
Commissioner Powers,
For some reason, I'm only seeing kind of half the page, and when I touch the part that should be yay, nothing happens.
All right, Commissioner Powers votes in the affirmative for the minutes receipt,
Ah, there it is.
and those minutes are received unanimously. Next item on today's agenda are continuance requests, and I do believe we have a few of those. Mr. Butler, are you reading those, or is Mr. Chambliss?
I will go ahead and read those. First is number 18, SPUD 1299, deferred to March 25th. Item 19, PUD 1786, defer to May 13th. And item 20, C7230, defer also to May 13th.
Excellent. Is there anyone that wanted to be heard on any of those items today? I don't see any hands raised, so if there's no further discussion on those from commissioners, I'll take a motion on those continuances as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the uncontested continuances be granted as read.
Thank you. I have a motion and I do have a second from Commissioner Clare, so please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Aye.
All votes should have been cast.
is Commissioner LaForge? There we go.
And those continuances are approved unanimously. I believe we have one new request, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Butler.
We do. It's item 9, SP 550. That's request to continue to March 25th.
And that was item number 9 on today's agenda, SP 550. Is there anyone here that had wanted to be heard on that item today? Okay. If there's no further discussion from commissioners on this, I will take a motion to continue the item as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue item 9 to the March 25th meeting.
I have a motion and a second by Commissioner Clare. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Excellent. And that continuance is approved unanimously. Next item on today's agenda would be the consent items, which we have none. So we'll move to items requiring separate vote. First item, item number 1.
Item 1 is PC 10716, an application to rezone 1724, 1728, 1734, and 1736 Northwest First Street from R2 to I1.
Okay. Is the applicant with us today?
Yeah, good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, this is an item that you undoubtedly recognize. This came through previously from an architect that was representing a prospective buyer. My client is the property owner. He has dispelled of the prospective buyer and wants to just go get it rezoned. I recall the discussion at the time of the spud was about curb cuts and things of that nature. My client is fine with meeting all code requirements. We filed it as an I2 application. Staff asked us to move it to I1 so that there wouldn't be any outdoor storage. We're happy to do that. So the application before you is an I1 application. We do have I2 to our south, to our east, and to our north. We believe it to be compatible with the area, and with removing I2 and therefore removing the outdoor storage component, I believe it to be an appropriate application. I'd ask for your approval and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Box. I'll just note for the purpose of the record that in the discussion prior to the meeting, Mr. Chambliss noted that items 1 through 4 on today's agenda, it was staff's intention to include those on consent items, just so commissioners are aware of that. I made the decision we should hear them individually because that's the way they were agended and noticed and the way it was published. So we're going to hear them. I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this. Commissioner Highsmith, this is your ward, sir. Do you have questions?
No, sir. I discussed with the applicant. This does, in my opinion, meet the intents expressed in the previous time that this same piece of dirt came through the planning commission. So I have no issues and I'd be ready to make a motion.
Okay, let's see if anybody from the public wants to be heard on this item. Again, this is item number 1, PC 10716. If you wanted to be heard on this item today, this is your opportunity. You can do so by pressing *6 on your phone to unmute, or *9 will raise your hand, or Alt-Y. I don't believe I have anybody.
I'm saddened. I don't
Anyone?
get on the consent docket, so I'm certainly saddened to hear that due to a glitch, I am not on the consent docket.
Well, you can get over it. Commissioners, if there's no further discussion, Commissioner Highsmith, I'll take a motion on the item.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a recommendation for approval.
I have a motion, and we'll see if I get a second here. I have a second from Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Hinkle votes in the affirmative. All votes have been cast, and that application is approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I've held my comment until this point because I didn't want it to appear as if I had any issue with that application. I don't. But as I was reviewing it, it did seem to me like, we might benefit from one of those more relaxed, informal discussions that we've been talking about recently about the development in this area. It is such an odd mix of industrial and now residential. And if we are, thinking about creating boundaries for those two very, very different kinds of development, and if we had any kind of, overview of how much of the industrial is decaying or how much of the residential is decaying. We've seen a number of applications in this area for commercial and residential, as though it might very well be poised to take up some of the westward creeping development from downtown. And I think it might just be a good idea for us to have a more informal way to talk about this area, get some background information, make some, not policy, but just things to keep in mind as we're looking at these one by one individual applications as they come forward.
That's a good idea. We can certainly discuss that a little bit more at the end of the agenda today under additional items or other business. I think we could revisit that to see if there's a time we could, or what we could get from staff that would help us evaluate that more. Mr. Butler, item number 2.
Item 2 is C 7270, final plat of Oakdale Ridge, and that is located northeast 122nd Street and east of North Coltrane Avenue.
Okay. Is the applicant present?
Yeah, Tim Johnson's here on behalf of the applicant.
Mr. Johnson, anything to add to staff's introduction of that item?
Nothing to add to the introduction. However, there was a comment we received today from the traffic staff about relocating the entrance about 200 feet, and we are willing to do that and can agree to that.
Right now, what's being displayed on our screen is a final plat, the actual plat drawing itself.
Right.
Which entrance are you referring to?
The one on the west.
Okay.
On
And just
Coltrane.
okay, thank you. Okay. Would we need to make any amendment to this, Mr. Johnson, as a result of that change?
No, we could it'll just shift the lots where the drive is going to be. So we'll move it 200 feet north as the staff recommended.
Got it. Okay.
Will that align with that northernmost east-west road?
I think it will be close. So we'll look at it. If it's an issue of sight distance. So if I can make it align, I may do that. But it's more concerning about the 200-foot separation. So we'll make sure that that's done before we bring the plat back to be approved by council.
Okay. Looks like Mr. McCubbin from city staff has his hand raised, so I'll recognize him at this time.
Yes, we went out and checked the sight distance yesterday. The 200 feet, it should align with 124th Street as part of this plat. It could probably move further to the north and line up with 124th Street and still be good. We were good looking to the south. It was just looking to the north was the issue.
But you believe that what Mr. Johnson has proposed to us at this point would comply with those requests?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'll just note for the purpose of the record too, the staff report says that the design of the preliminary plat conforms with the subdivision regulations. It did not mention that it complies or conforms with the preliminary plat or the underlying zoning. Staff did confirm for me that that is the case. So it does conform with those as well. Commissioner Pennington, this is your award, sir. Do you have any additional comments or concerns on this one?
No, I don't. And it sounds like we don't need another TE to accomplish what Tim just outlined, correct?
I'm glad that you're verifying that. That's my understanding. So if we do need one, staff, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to move it with the assumption that that's handled. JJ shaking his head no. So
okay. And I feel completely and totally comfortable with this, and I'm happy to make the motion to approve when it's time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let me make certain that there's nobody with us that wanted to be heard on this item today. If you wanted to be heard on this, this is C-7270, item number 2 on today's agenda. *6 will mute or unmute, space bar on your computer, or you can raise your hand by pressing *9 or Alt-Y on your computer. I don't see any hands raised. So with that, Commissioner Pennington, I'll take the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of C-7270.
I have a motion to approve the final plat for C-7270, and as soon as staff shows me the second, by Commissioner Privet. The motion has been seconded by Commissioner Privet, so please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
Okay, all votes should be cast, and that application is approved unanimously. Item number 3 on today's agenda, Mr. Butler.
Item 3 is case number C-7273, final plat of Forest Village Estates, Section 3, located south of Northeast 36th Street and west of North Bryant Avenue.
Is the applicant with us? Okay.
Over here with Anchor Engineering.
It is a final plat. It should have been on consent. Here's what I'll note for the record. The design of the final plat is in conformance with the subdivision regulations. It's also in conformance with the preliminary plat for Forest Village Estates and with the underlying PUD, which is 996. So Commissioner Pennington, this is in your ward. Do you have questions or comments on this one?
No questions or comments, ready to move to approve.
Okay, let me ask quickly if there's anybody that wants to be heard on this item today. If so, please raise your hand at this time. Alt-Y or *9. I'm not seeing anybody, so I'll take the motion.
I move approval of item C-273. Excuse me, C-7273.
Nailed it. I have a motion and a second from Commissioner Highsmith to approve the final plat for C-7273. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Okay, all votes should be cast.
Commissioner Pennington and Commissioner LaForge. Commissioner LaForge.
Yeah, it says here my internet connection is unstable, and I'm not having a button pop up, so I will vote aye verbally. And my button was working earlier, but it's not now.
Okay, Commissioner LaForge has voted in the affirmative, so now all votes should be cast, and that application is approved unanimously. Next item on today's agenda is item number 4, Mr. Butler.
First case number C-7275, final plat of Pembroke Phase 2, located south of West Wilshire Boulevard and east of North County Line Road.
Okay, applicant with us?
Yes, sir. Tim Johnson again on behalf of the applicant.
Anything to add to the introduction on this item, Mr. Johnson?
No, this is a portion of a preliminary plat that was previously approved. I'd be happy to answer any questions on it.
Okay. I'll just note, as usual, for the purpose of the record, the design of this phase of the Pembroke development conforms with the subdivision regulation. It also does conform with the preliminary plat and the underlying zoning, which in this case is R1. Commissioner Clare, this is your award, sir. Do you have anything to add to our discussion here?
I do not. I have no questions or concerns, so I'm ready to make a motion if no further discussion.
Okay, let's see if anybody from the public wants to be heard on this one. Again, this is C-7275. please press *9 on your phone or Alt-Y on your computer if you'd like to be heard, and I'll pause just a moment to see if anybody's interested. I don't see anybody, so I'll take the motion.
All right, I move approval of item C 7275.
I have a motion and a second from Commissioner Coffey to approve the final plat of C 7275. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Commissioner LaForge?
My
You're
button is
muted.
working again, so I clicked it.
Oh, good. Okay,
Yes.
that item is approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item on today's agenda, and again, just because it was a little off today on the published agenda, this would be our first item that should have been for separate vote. So with that, Mr. Butler, why don't you introduce the item?
Item number 5 is SPUD 1297, an application to rezone 14800 South Sooner Road from PUD 1422 to SPUD 1297.
Okay, is the applicant with us today?
Yes, sir. This is Doug Wallets here on behalf of my client, Habib Javed.
Hi, Mr. Wallace. Anything to add to staff's introduction to your item, sir?
I would just add that really the only thing that we're seeking to do here, this is a 4.3 acres Mr. Javed has recently purchased. He is a Sonic franchisee in Oklahoma City. He would like to develop 1.4 acres roughly of this parcel into a Sonic, and it is, to your point earlier, it's already governed by an existing PUD. We're just seeking to basically add 2 additional use restrictions. One of those would be to allow a drive-in restaurant, and the second one would be to allow a drive-through on the property as well.
Yep. Commissioner Privet, this is your ward. Before I turn it over to you, I will note, just to make sure everybody's aware, we're actually rezoning, though, more land than is required for this Sonic, which is going to allow these drive-through order windows. So I noticed in the application under noise regulations, you've got some language here, I think, that deviates from what we require on a typical basis. So I can come back to that. But Commissioner Privet, what thoughts or comments do you have on this one, sir?
My main concerns are the drive-through and the mitigation from the sound to the residential.
Yeah. Do you know, Mr. Wallace, are you, could you comply with being 150 feet from the east boundary for your drive-in and drive-through order windows?
We could not be 150 feet from the far west portion of anybody's residential property line. We're right at 200 feet from the residents themselves as it relates to the farthest, or excuse me, to them, it would be the closest speaker from any of those stalls. So we're positioned in such a way that, like I said, we're 200 feet. Those are very deep backyards within that community. My client has also agreed to put place trees on the back there every 20 feet. So, you know, we're going to take the steps necessary, and we visited with the neighbors, that the 3 properties that back up to that, 2 of the 3 anyway, the third one we were not able to reach. They realized that this is zoned commercial. They didn't have issues. That was Mr. Griffin and Mrs. Butler. They didn't have issues with the Sonic going in there.
Well, I don't know if anybody's joined us. I'll ask when I get to that point in the discussion. I think what I want to reiterate is this is actually going to impact, Mr. Wallace, more than those 3 homeowners, because you're rezoning more land to allow for this than what's really being constructed today. In other words, so another fast food restaurant can build to the north of this and going to back up to even more homeowners with the same problem. I don't know. You know, Commissioner Privet, does this give you pause, concern? What's your read on that, given the depth of the backyards? I mean, those are already developed homes, so it's not like it's undeveloped residential land. But what's your take on that?
Mr. Chairman, quickly, just really quickly, for clarification from Mr. Wallace, are you saying 200 feet from the home, correct, right? Not from the property line, not from the westernmost property line of the residential, right?
So yeah, 200 feet from the home. And then we had agreed to insert language saying we'd be 60 foot off any residential district with our speakers.
Thanks, sorry. Just wanted to say that before we lost it.
No, that's a great clarification.
I recall we did the PUD on this last time, it was a storage for a storage facility. And I remember at the time, the residents had concern with that. I did not, but they did. I can't see where they would not be concerned with this big of a fast food possible area.
Well,
Yeah, that's because they don't have people driving up to the window every 10 seconds right now and ordering something.
Yeah.
yeah, well, and the only part that I would add to this, I know everybody here is from Oklahoma City, so they're very familiar with the Sonic brand. This is a smaller footprint. There's far fewer stalls. It does include a drive-through, but it's a smaller building as well. And due to the way that there's no sewer over here, we're going to have septic and an aerobic system. So we're anticipating a lot of green space between us and our neighbors. In fact, 30 feet off their fence line. And again, my client's very willing to plant trees along the backside there to help screen the noise as well.
Okay, other commissioners have thoughts or comments on this?
I'll just add a point of clarification. I did a quick measurement on further north on this property, and all those homes are more regularly aligned to the lot, and all are about 150 feet off of there. There's 150 feet of separation from the rear of the structure to the lot line. So just.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, go ahead, Mary.
In addition to the trees, is any fencing planned, stockade or otherwise?
The current residential neighborhood is
Yes.
is entirely stockade fence along that
Be-
perimeter.
Behind the Sonic,
Yes, ma'am,
okay.
It's just standard 6-foot tall fencing, I'm sure.
it is.
Yeah.
And listen, my client, I understand the concern. At the end of the day, his customers are going to be those neighbors as well. So we want to make sure they're happy and satisfied with this also. I don't think he has a problem if you guys wanted to say, look, we would limit the drive-through to just the Sonic property. It's not his goal to go in there and put up a bunch of competition for himself. I think his plans for the remaining three plus acres really were commercial strip center.
We couldn't do that unless you redid your application to divide it into tracts.
Okay.
That's the problem. We can't, there's no way for us to regulate that the way the application is presented. Look, Mr. Waltz,
That's my biggest concern too, is the area we got here. Not so much as just one Sonic, but this is room for 6-7 Sonics.
right. Well, and my issue here is twofold. One, this is a state highway that really connects I-240 to Norman. So I think it's fair to say we're going to see some commercial development over here.
Yeah, and you've got some across the street too with a gas station and liquor
Right.
store. And,
It really is, Mr. Wallace, in my view, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but for me, we've drawn a pretty clear line as a commission over the last couple of years that 150 feet is kind of that compatibility line for the drive-through order window. So I think what at least I would want to see to feel like we've objectively evaluated this one the way we've evaluated every other application is we're going to have to see some additional mitigation. And trees on 20-foot centers are not going to do anything for noise. They're going to do some things for light. They're going to do some things for, but they're not going to do anything for noise, and especially at the outset. So I don't know if you have other thoughts or, Commissioner Privet or frankly, Commissioner Clare, given your background, if you have other thoughts, but that's my concern is what more could we do, to buffer that, whether they're in their house or they're in their pool. They don't want to hear a large iced tea with strawberry lemonade get ordered every, 38 seconds.
What are the hours of operation?
Yeah, so generally speaking, these will run, Habib opens those stores around 7 o'clock in the morning. And in the winter months, they'll usually go till about 10 o'clock in the evening or at night. In the summer months, they will stay open later, usually to midnight.
Commissioners, I would like to interject something here. When this property was rezoned, probably 11 years ago now, if I recall correctly, the commission had a different approach to these kind of applications. We didn't allow commercial zoning to spread along section line roads. They were clustered at the intersection of section line roads. So much sort of in the style of what shows as SPUD 854. across Center Road. But if you look at the provisions of PUD 1697, it very specifically does not permit fast food. And I don't even know whether we had a separate fast food drive-in, with speakers back then, but it was because of the impact on adjoining residential. I think Chairman Cravens is accurate that that attitude has shifted with this configuration of the commission, but we have been pretty consistent with maintaining that separation for drive-through speakers and so forth. I think this would be an enormous encroachment on this neighborhood. I will not be able to support it. I mean, at a bare minimum, it should be divided into tracts so that what is done on this particular tract can be limited. There's definitely room for 2 more fast food pads here, and I just can't support that.
If not more than that, depending on how they're configured. Let's see real quickly if there's any commissioners that haven't spoken up on the item, just so we know where we are and Mr. Wallets kind of knows where we are. Does anybody feel strongly the other way from what Commissioner Powers just spoke of? Because I tend to agree with her in large part.
Yeah, and I remember rezoning this just like 3 years ago, maybe, if that. To the
for a mini storage.
Yeah.
Mini storage.
Yeah, and a mini storage being a compatibility issue for residential is more of an unfounded fear of residents than it is a real compatibility problem. We see that all the time. Does anybody feel strongly that we should approve it? Okay, Mr. Wallace, here's what I would suggest. I'm a believer that there's an appropriateness for commercial along a state highway corridor like Sooner Road. I think we should. I think I'd ask you to take a little bit of time. Would be my suggestion, unless anybody objects, particularly Commissioner Privet being his ward. Take some time and think about dividing this into tracts, and maybe preserving, the Sonic, trying to find some other compatibility measures you could insert to buffer those residences, and then limiting the balance of that tract to the north to exclude those, but maybe offer the other commercial uses that aren't as offensive to those adjoining neighbors to the east. That would be my suggestion to you. It's a friendly one. You can do whatever you'd like, but I think you're in a pinch here.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
Staff here, Sarah Welch, Planning Department. I just wanted to go on record and let you know that we talked the applicant into zoning the entire piece. Originally, this whole stretch was PUD 1422. You all remember PUD 1697 came through recently for the mini storage. They originally submitted an SPUD just for the Sonic, and we talked them into doing the whole thing because it would have left over this other piece. And then the regulations that would have been left behind in 1422 didn't make sense anymore. So two things, and this would be up, of course, to either JJ or municipal counselor's office. I think that if they are in agreement, you could TE this application so that the southern so many hundred feet could only be this use. Another option, or for the applicant really, is do they need the drive-through for this product? We have both a drive-in and a drive-through. So that I think that's a discussion that would benefit the applicant if the commission had that.
Yeah, and look, I appreciate you speaking up, Sarah, and saying that and sort of owning that. But I think there's some compatibility issues that need to be addressed. I don't think we want to sit here and try to litigate this on Zoom for 30 more minutes and see if we can get to a resolution everybody feels comfortable with. I think we've given Mr. Wallace good feedback on, at least from our perspective as the commission, as opposed to what staff's perspective was, what it's going to take to count to 5. I want to be clear. I'm not in support of commercial development along this road. I'm in support of compatible commercial development along this road, and I think you can get there. But I think that you should take 2 weeks and try and get there, not with us listening to you. That's my advice. And I guess I would want some comment from staff about whether or not it would even would it have to be renoticed if he divided it into tracts? I wouldn't think so, but maybe.
No.
Okay, no. So Mr. Wallace, what say you?
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's feedback and the time this afternoon. We will go back, we'll revisit it as a separate track and with additional mitigation and bring it back to you guys.
I want to apologize to you for having to take the continuance, just in the sense that I wish, we could have, there's some way to have, speak about this in advance. But having said that, is there any other feedback commissioners have, since he has taken a 2-week continuance, that you would need to see in order to feel better about the application, or that would change your mind? So,
Yeah, this is Commissioner Clare, and looking at the topo on site, these lots sit substantially lower than the homes behind them. So as far as the 6-foot privacy fence that is already in place, I think I would want to see maybe a higher fence to help mitigate some of the sound issues.
Or a masonry wall.
or a wall, something, because of the topo on the site, and it sits lower. You're going to need something a little bit higher than 6 feet to, probably a combination of. And I also noticed it's not clear on the exhibit. I don't know if they're setback lines or if it's an easement line on the back, but when we think about trees along the back side of there, if that is in fact an easement, how does that work with trees in that easement? So.
Yeah, I don't believe that is an easement, but that's good feedback nonetheless, and we'll take it under advisement and come back to you guys in 2 weeks.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Hopefully you'll take this feedback we've given you, and you can come back and we can work through it. So if there's no further discussion from commissioners on this, given that we're going to give a continuance, don't need to hear from folks on it, but if there's no discussion from commissioners, I'll take a continuance to the March 25th meeting.
God, we had somebody raise their hand. I don't know if they still.
We did have somebody raise their hand?
Yeah, Alfredo Contreras.
Okay. At this point, I'm only going to take comments if there are concerns about the continuance. So if there's somebody who has comments on a concern with the continuance, certainly listen to those comments at this time.
No comments. I'll move for a continuance on March 25th.
Okay, I have a motion to continue the case to March 25th and a second for Commissioner Pennington. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Commissioner LaForge, you can vote now. Never mind. We should have all votes cast.
No, my button once again failed. Sorry, Mr. Chair, but Rusty, I vote aye.
Okay, great. Now all votes are cast. And that item has been continued. Ms. Wallace, thank you very much for your time and appreciate it. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you, sir.
Next item on today's agenda is item number 6.
Item 6 is SPUD 1298, application to rezone 7000 Plaza Mayor Boulevard from I-2 to SP 1298.
Okay, is the applicant present?
Yes, Wes Rutledge here on behalf of my client, Chris Brewster, who's also on the call.
Is there anything you'd like to add to staff's introduction of your item, sir?
Other than the recommendations made at the end of the staff report, I would like to have a little bit of discussion about that. This spud is really reflective of a spud that was recently approved for another portion of the mall to put a school in. So
We lost you.
Sorry. The portion just to the south and east of the mall is currently a high school and middle school, previously approved by a SPUD application. So just to point out that this is a very similar use and activity for the mall.
Got it. There are 2 technical evaluations, sir. Are you in agreement with both of those?
One of them is to point out where the playground areas will be. And if we can pull up the aerial, it might be easier to see the aerial photo. So just to the south and west corner of the site, there's a green area and then a sunken courtyard, which will be used for the playground area. Okay. It's kind of where that diagonal is on the southwest corner of the site.
Oh, okay. And just for the purposes of marking the exhibit you're showing me, it's where the measurement 100.41 is located?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So that's where the outdoor area would be located.
Right.
Okay. So would that satisfy staff to the extent necessary to satisfy technical evaluation number 1? Somebody,
Yes.
anybody? Thank you. Okay, and you're in agreement with technical evaluation number 2 as well on the pedestrian connection from the ring road?
Evaluation number 2 speaks to adding a sidewalk that leads north, kind of along that northernmost leg of the property line, the spud line. We would like to submit and maybe have you guys consider that, that would really lead to nowhere, that sidewalk would. And the property is really surrounded by paved access for anybody to walk up to the building. It is planned to be an elementary school, so all the kids are really going to be dropped off at the front door, either by bus or by car. And we're just concerned about the financial hardship that would create for the project to build that sidewalk, and it would probably never get used.
Who owns
Staff,
it?
could we get,
Who
yeah,
owns it
could we get
prior to that-
comments from staff here?
That parking lot. I mean, they have to mow that parking lot.
I can answer. This is Sarah. It's just that, with the addition of the elementary school, we're just trying to make incremental improvements anywhere we can for pedestrian and, adding trees wherever we can. So is it possible to plant trees there or?
I think that's a possibility.
Yeah.
The sidewalk, I think, would be the most expense.
We recognize that improving connectivity and pedestrian connections in this area is difficult because it have to be kind of done holistically. We're just trying to get, incremental improvements wherever we can. So I'm a mom, and so I think about the elementary and having a place to play and having access to nature, and so.
Right. Yeah, I used to work out there and watch them, and they do their sports all out in the parking lot and run up and down
And comprehensive plan has a whole chapter on, parks and recreation and
Right.
access to nature. It's for your consideration only.
Further
This
north
is
of the lot needs to be mowed regularly.
This is Commissioner Highsmith. Yeah, it seems to me like I kind of agree with both sides here, and I'm only talking to make the point that I don't think it's my personal opinion, just having worked on a lot of projects like this, that the sidewalk itself is not that much of a financial burden. And so while I understand what he's saying, like to me, I wouldn't make this decision based on, concern over a financial burden on the elementary school. I think, a single sidewalk of that distance is not, just to my eyes,
What would be the distance?
365 feet.
365 feet, and it's 5 foot wide, Mr. Rutledge?
To tie into the existing sidewalk, yes.
Okay, so 5 feet by 365 feet?
Roughly, yes.
Actually,
I mean, at most, we're talking about an $11,000 expense, so we're clear. I will just say this, we hear regularly, we heard it at the issue out in Mustang. We've heard other complaints about there not being a safe means of travel for these elementary schools and kids. I'm actually a little more concerned here because this is a sea of parking that cars just kind of navigate wherever they want. I think I understand why staff included it, and I think it's particularly responsive to some of the complaints we received from neighbors over the years. I know this is not, it's a charter school. I understand that it's not a public school, so to speak, but I'm not sure that I've been convinced that we shouldn't require the sidewalk. I think Commissioner Highsmith is right.
Commissioner Craven.
Yes, sir.
I've heard both sides of the argument. I'm real familiar with this. I'm out there quite a bit. There's not a single kid that's going to walk to that school.
Right. But are there going to be parking, are there going to be parking queues and things like that where these kids are going to be parking and then walking in on the sidewalk as opposed to the street? I mean, that's what I'm envisioning. I'm having a hard time envisioning how it will actually work by admission because it's not a school, it's abandoned shopping mall.
Can we go back to the enlarged plan a little?
Scott, if you look over there where Santa Fe is, see kind of how they've made their parking there.
Yeah.
And they've got like one way in, one way out there. That's what I'm more concerned with is the driving around there. It's crazy. I mean, you can go in and out and weave in everywhere.
That's
And,
what I'm saying.
and I mean, as far as that, I'd be more concerned with that than just a sidewalk going out to. There's really nothing there.
I'm going to echo that. Are the elementary school kids going to be allowed to play out in the parking lot where the high school kids are buzzing in and out?
Well, they do play out there in the parking lot, and the high school kids run out there. And like I said, I think the high school kids are stuck to that one parking lot over there on the east. And I don't.
But accessing it, they could turn in off of 66 there and
Yeah,
fly right through
could.
where.
And they've got a highway patrol that sits there every morning. But
I don't
know if he's actually there. But.
This is Commissioner Highsmith again. I'm not trying to discuss this and belabor this point forever, but all I'd like to point out, and part of the reason why I think the sidewalk still, to me, makes some degree of sense, is that if you look around the country at what the future of shopping malls like this tends to be, there's a lot of redevelopment of these types of things that follows this pattern, which ends up with housing as part of the equation. I mean, when you've got these massive empty parking lots around a shopping mall, a lot of developers end up looking at that outside area of unused parking as very attractive developable land around their commercial. And there's a lot of places that have done this where suddenly you'll start to see apartments and housing go up around that outer edge. And to me, this looks like exactly the kind of place that would benefit from that. So I don't know. I mean, like partially, like it's always the question of like, chicken or the egg, which do you build first? Do you do the sidewalks, or do you wait for people to try to start walking before you put the sidewalks in? And I think we can discuss it to death and still not be able to see the future. So to me, it's just kind of like, well, we should do the right thing. And to me, a small section of sidewalks that might right now lead to nowhere isn't that big a deal to ask. But also, I'm not here to die on this hill, but that's just my 2 cents.
I understand. I think we've discussed it pretty thoroughly. Commissioner Pruitt, do you have any final thoughts on it?
Chairman Cravens, I actually have a completely separate question. I say absolutely yes on the sidewalk. We don't even need to talk about that anymore. But I would like to know from staff or the applicant, where is the nearest active operational industrial use to this property?
Getting ready to be a batch plant, I think, that we approved just northeast of there.
The one to the north?
Yep.
Okay.
All of that I-2 stuff to the north is active, just as the stuff to the east is as well.
But we're talking separated to the north by southeast
66th Street
6th, and then to the east by the railroad tracks, right?
And the ring
Okay.
road.
Okay. The outer ring road.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure all the stuff on the west side of that is dead. I think it's just a bunch of empty buildings. Mike, am I right?
Pretty much. There's some schools going in over there too, but yeah, the bar is closed down.
The hotel's still live and the Burger King's still live, but I think everything else around that ring over there is closed, shut.
Well, I'm all in favor of
Santa Fe, yeah.
I'm all in favor of this conversion. The idea that this completely out of date a shopping mall could have a separate life as a multi-level school, I think is a great idea. I keep hoping that it will work. It seems to be moving that direction with more energy than it has moved in any other direction since it was a mall. So I do think they need the sidewalk, but otherwise, that's really all I have to say.
Thank you.
Mr. Rutledge, this is the old Hudaberg parts warehouse site, right?
Correct.
All right. Well, any other questions, Commissioner Privet? I want to see if anybody else wants to be heard on this item from the public.
Are they going to continue with the gun shows and whatever shows on the weekends? I know it's a different area, but it's right next to that school. I don't know if that would be a concern or not, but
Yes, they are.
all right. Good that it's just the weekends, but if it expanded over that, I might have an issue with it, but not right now.
Are you trying to tell me that we're running into use compatibility concerns between an old shopping mall, schools, and heavy industrial?
Nah, possibly, but
Sorry, zoning joke. Okay, is there anybody here that wants to be heard, members of the public, on this item today? This is SPUD 1298. And since it's been a minute, just as a reminder, *6 on your phone will unmute you. But first, if you push *9 to raise your hand, or Alt-Y on your computer, and I'll pause a moment. I don't see anybody at this point that wants to be heard. Commissioner Privet, I think we'll let you make your motion and see where we are. As it stands right now, I think both technical evaluations are still included unless you've been persuaded to delete the sidewalk TE in 2.
Man, I'm either or, I guess. Like I said, that area, you could paint 2 lines on the massive amount of concrete there, and there's your sidewalk. But we're just adding concrete to concrete. Man, I'd like to see the whole place, redevelop and all the roads and everything make sense, but that's not going to happen. So I just don't see sidewalks being much of a spur to that. But whatever's going to get votes to get it passed. And if the applicant's agreeable to it, I'll go ahead and include the TEs.
Applicant, what say you?
We are.
Mr. Rutledge?
I'd like to defer to my owner if I could, if he's good with that. He's on the call.
I am. This is Chris Brewster, Superintendent of Santa Fe South Schools, and we would certainly defer if that's the pleasure. To let you all know, we do own a total of 26 acres in that quadrant, and we do intend to develop it as a safe green space for kids. So I hope you guys will be very pleased as we come before you in the months and years to come.
We appreciate that. Just to confirm, when you say defer, you mean you're agreeable to the sidewalk?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Privet, you got your answer, sir, so I think we're ready for a motion.
All right. I like the green space for the kids too. That sounds good. I'll make a motion to approve case number SPUD 1298, subject to TEs 1 and 2.
Fantastic. I have a motion and hopefully a second by Commissioner Coffey, indeed. So please cast your votes. This is a motion and a second to recommend approval to City Council on SPUD 1298. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
Okay. Commissioner LaForge?
Yes.
All votes should be cast. And that application is approved unanimously. Good luck with the project, gentlemen.
And Scott, this is Commissioner Highsmith. I'm going to step out for just 1 second.
You bet. Thank you for letting me know. That's not a recusal, just for the folks listening at home. He's just stepping away from his computer for a moment. Next item is item number 7, Mr. Butler.
7 is SPUD 1295, an application to rezone 806 Northwest 91st Street from R1 to SPUD 1295.
Applicant present.
Yes, sir. Tim Johnson here on behalf of the applicant.
Mr. Johnson, go ahead and give us additional information. I know you've got some here on this item.
Yeah, so just so you know, this is a old R1 piece of property that had an old house that was dilapidated. It was torn down a number of years ago. Our client is proposing to come in and do a specific limited multifamily project, limited to 14 units, 7 flats on each floor. It's 2-story max with a flat roof. We've got the parking in the rear. We intend to come back and talk to Traffic Commission about getting some on-street parking on 91st Street for guests. We butt up against Classen Boulevard, which is part of the OKC Bike Walk Oklahoma City biking plan that's supposed to reduce the Classen Boulevard to single lanes and protected bicycle routes. We are 1 block from the Britton District, and we believe that some market rate workforce housing is a very good application here. It's infill zoning. There are two older houses west of us, and then there's a very large church parking lot. The street north of us has several houses that have been renovated. And then there's a church north of that. The house to our west is currently not occupiable, but it has been purchased to be renovated. We've met with both those homeowners. We had a homeowners association meeting about a week ago. And obviously we tried to satisfy all their requests. And I think just in summary, what's changed since the application came in and what you see on this image is we've added an 8-foot site-proof screen on the west and south. At the property owner to the west request, we're putting a 5-foot landscape buffer with evergreens planted every 10 feet on her property with her permission. We're putting the smooth side of the fence out on the west and south. And then as you can see, we're adding sidewalks and landscaping to the property and the project that would make it fit appropriately. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I appreciate it. Just a couple of things on this before I turn it over to Commissioner Powers, just for Commissioner's benefit. The parking on the street that's shown on the site plan we're looking at now on Northwest 91st is not something we approved. That's something the Traffic Commission would have to approve. So just FYI on that. Second thing is an email was circulated on March the 5th from Mark Zitzow, one of Mr. Johnson's associates, which discusses the changes to the PUD document. I'm assuming everybody received that. He mentioned the 8-foot screening on the west and south with the smooth side facing west. And he also, and then also all the commercial uses were removed. Is that correct, Mr. Johnson?
That's correct. I failed to mention that.
And the commercial signage was also removed?
Yes, sir.
And then the site plan was reflected to correct the driveway location and the increased landscaping as per the amended discussion we just had. So with that, Commissioner Powers, I'll turn it over to you to see if you have additional concerns on this item.
No additional concerns. We met with the neighbors. There was a lot of very active discussion. I think the principal opponents to the project were focused really on the commercial uses, and the applicant, readily conceded that, and they were eliminated from the application. We did discuss the question of trash pickup and how that would work, and whether it would be possible for these units to have, individual big glues. And that's great if it works out, but I'm kind of doubting that. So we did discuss a little bit about where a dumpster would be placed if it was necessary to have one. There's clearly not room to separate it very far from adjoining property lines, but the discussion was about locating it sort of triangularly as far from each of the houses to the west and south, so that it would end up probably on that south property line, about where that little island shows there.
Correct. And we agreed that's what, if we have a small dumpster, that's where it would go.
Just to confirm, and I know there's some folks joining by phone, but could we put the cursor for the benefit of the commissioners over the area that we're referencing? Is that where that, like right there?
No, a little to the west, and then on the south property line.
So continue moving west there?
Right there, yeah.
Okay. Got it. Hopefully the commissioners can see that and are clear about what is being proposed. Commissioner Powers, is that memorialized into the revised SPUD document somewhere?
It probably hasn't been yet, but it will be between now and council.
Yeah, we agreed.
But you're in agreement with that change, Mr. Johnson?
We are.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Powers?
No, I'm curious to see if there are people who want to be heard, what they have to say.
Okay, let's find out. At this point, we'll take public comments or concerns on SPUD 1295. If you would, *9 or Alt-Y will raise your hand. And I'll pause a moment to see. Again, *9 on your phone or Alt and the Y key on your computer. I do have one person. Looks like I have a first name only, so forgive me, but Margaret, if you push *6, we'd love to hear your concerns.
Well, my concerns are the same that I have had all the time, and that is the extra traffic in the area. And and the extra rubbish. I did go to visit the other apartment complex that Mr. Cove had mentioned, and I saw that, yes, there's a fairly clean within the grounds, but around the edges, they're not. Now, it's around the edges that are going to affect me. So I would just like a stipulation that the people that he hired to clean this also check around the edges. I have a lot of reservations about having an apartment building 2 doors down from my house, but since nobody else was really willing to speak up and tell anybody other than me that they objected, I don't think that my one vote is going to carry very much. But I do plan to contact the owners if that becomes a real problem.
Margaret, we appreciate that. Just for the purposes of clarity, we are told in our staff report there is access from 91st proposed, which we're seeing on a site plan now. I know that you're joining us, I believe, by phone. But
that's correct.
Yes, ma'am. So we see a site plan you don't see, but it shows an entrance off of 91st. And then
no, I can see the plan.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Okay. So, and then we've got one on Classen. It does say that there are 2 mitigation factors for traffic. One is the bus transit that's available at 91st and Western. The other is that 91st Street has 90 feet of right-of-way because of the adjacency to Classen Boulevard, I'm assuming. So we're not told that there's any traffic concerns from staff about what this project would do to traffic in the area, so I point that out. One thing I would point out to the other commissioners on traffic, just as a reminder, we just closed a section of 90th Street not very long ago. So, Mr. Johnson, I believe that was your application, if I'm not mistaken. Was that from Classen or was it from Francis?
Just from Francis, just the one block.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. So, well, thank you, Margaret, and I'm sorry to use your first name only, but thank you for joining us today.
My name is Margaret McCluskey.
Thank you, Ms. McCluskey. I appreciate you giving us your last name for the record. And would you mind, ma'am, what was your address?
820 Northwest 91st Street.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard on SPUD 1295? That's Alt-Wire *9. Okay, seeing none, I think we are ready for a motion, Commissioner Powers, unless there's additional discussion from commissioners.
If not, I'll move approval of item number 7, SPUD 1295, with the changes and additions that we've discussed.
Yeah, I think what we could do is we could say as the changes that are outlined to the SPU document in the email sent by the applicant on March the 5th and as referenced in our discussion today.
Okay.
So with that, I'll take a motion. I have a motion. And I do have a second for Commissioner Pennington, so please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Commissioner LaForge?
Yes.
All votes have been cast or should be.
My screen shows that was moved by Mary Coffey.
Yeah, we need to correct that, staff, if we can. I'm sure they'll correct it. The motion was made by Commissioner Powers. It was seconded by Commissioner Pennington, but it has been voted as unanimously for approval. So we can correct that in minutes. Item number 8. Mr. Butler?
Item number 8 is SPUD 1300, application to rezone 3700 South Western Avenue from O1 to SPUD 1300.
Good afternoon, David Box again, 522 Colcord Drive. This is a site that is currently zoned O1. The SPUD keeps the O1 base and adds 2 use units, retail sales and services, and then custom manufacturing. The custom manufacturing is limited to the manufacturing of medical marijuana. Currently, the retail sales and services is limited to medical marijuana. In talking to a few commissioners, there was a request that we take the limitation off and just allow retail. I have spoken to my client. He is good with that. So there are no TEs. There was a letter of protest that you received in your packet. My client did go visit with those people. I'm not sure if they were able to get a letter in, but I did see correspondence from them that they are no longer in opposition and are supportive of the application. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and there are no technical evaluations.
Couple of questions before we turn it over to Commissioner Privet. I do not have a letter in my packet. Does anybody else have a letter? Did I miss this?
I don't have it either.
Okay, Mr. Box, who was the protestant? Just so we know for the record.
To the east, and I don't have their name. The homeowner to the east.
Okay, directly to the east?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, if they're not with us today, we'll assume that you're telling us the truth, that they are now in agreement, but we'll find out. I was one of the people who asked Mr. Box to remove the limitations just to medical marijuana. I view that as a really bad zoning practice. If it's appropriate for, medical marijuana sales, it's certainly appropriate for cell phones or, t-shirts or whatever else. I don't know if there's other people have different feelings on that. Certainly, I'd love to hear them. But I just think that having somebody come back and spend an average of 100 days to get a property rezoned so they could sell cell phones instead of, gummies seems like a complete waste of time and resources for the city and the applicants. So that was my rationale for requesting it. Commissioner Privet, do you have thoughts on that?
Yep, that's total agreement with that as well. And other than that, I don't have any issues. If we have anybody signed up, we'll hear from them.
Okay, let's find out. Is there anybody that wants to be heard on SPUD 1300 today? If so, please raise your hand. And you do that by pressing Alt-Y on your computer or *9 on your phone. I do not have anybody who appears to want to be heard. So if there's no further discussion and we're in agreement or there's no other issues, Commissioner Privet, I think we're ready.
Okay, I'll move to recommend approval of SPUD 1300 to City Council.
Subject to the deletion of the limitations to the medical marijuana uses?
Correct.
Okay. I have a motion and hopefully a second. A second from Commissioner Pennington has been received. So a motion and a second, please cast your votes. Commissioner Hink?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner LaForge?
I voted yes online again. Thanks.
Look at that. Internet's working. I love it. Item number 9 has been continued until March the 25th. So the next item on the agenda today is item number 10. Mr. Butler?
Item 10 is case C-7276, the final plat of Muirfield West Office Park, located west of May Avenue and south of Northwest 164th Street. It's also a variance to section 5.4.2.E.1 of the subdivision regulations.
Okay, applicant present?
Yes, sir. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here again on behalf of the applicant. This is kind of the final section of the office parks that have been built out at Muirfield, and there are 3 TEs. One is a request for a variance, and we agree to all of them.
Okay, this is in my ward, so I'll take the discussion. I don't have any issues with it, Mr. Johnson. Only question I have on the private drives, because they're not show that will be. Help me understand how they're going to access. Is it just like a private parking lot essentially? Is that what that drawing is showing me?
Yeah. So in order to sell these lots, they have to have access to a public street,
right?
Which is in this case will be access through a private parking lot that goes out to a public street, and there will be a single drive out to Muirfield Drive.
Muirfield, not 164th.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So I don't have any objection. That makes perfect sense. I just want to clarify. I'll note that outside of the requested variance, the design of the final plat is conformance with all other portions of the subdivision regulations and with the underlying zoning, which is PUD 1104. So I can't make a motion to approve it if I would. I guess I had to check just to be safe. If there's anybody here that wants to be heard on C-7276, please raise your hand at this time. I've lost my participant screen for some reason. There we go. I do have somebody signed up or who has raised their hand. It's just a phone number, so I don't have a name. *6 on your phone will unmute you, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. And start by giving us your name and address for the record, please.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, if you'll go back to the aerial picture, I live in a home that has the swimming pool in the corner there.
Sir, could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, I live, my name is Stephen Kirksey. I live at 16437 Scotland Way. And I back up right to the property that you're talking about here.
Okay. Staff, could we put that exhibit back up for Mr. Kirksey's benefit, please? There you are, Mr. Kirksey. Go right ahead.
Okay, if you'll see the section 6 and the property that is adjacent to it to the south, that is my home. Okay, my question is, Bill Roberts built my home, and he is the landowner here. And I spoke with him earlier last week, and he told me that all these were going to be single level home offices, and that there is a huge hill that comes up from the ground level of the street, and you can kind of see the gray area there on that aerial. That's probably a 20-foot rise. Okay, and my concerns is there's a retainer wall that holds up my fence that was built by Mr. Roberts. It's a concrete block fence, and I don't want the property to be eroded away so that my fence falls in, because I'm responsible for it. Okay, and we don't want to lose our privacy to a level, a 2-story level office complex there. Okay, that's the issues that I have about it, and I'm sure that all the neighbors adjacent to this property would have the same thing. I don't know that any of them is on the call, but that's my concerns.
Okay, Mr. Kirksey, I appreciate you joining us today and sharing those with us. A couple of points there. None of the commissioners have in front of them the underlying zoning document, which, as I referenced, is PUD 1104, because this is a final plat. So the zoning, which would have determined the finished height of the structures that are allowed here, has already been approved. And so this is just a final review of the plat itself. For the benefit of Mr. Kirksey, Mr. Johnson, does this area allow for 2-story offices? And if so, is that what's being built?
I apologize. I don't have the PUD in front of me, so I can't tell you if it allowed higher than that, but it is only intended to have single-story offices, and that's being driven by the amount of parking that's available.
Understood. Okay. Second question, what will the finished floor height or building height be, ground height, grade height of the project? Are you intending to remove some of that dirt, or what's your plan there?
Yeah, so we'll have to take out some of that dirt in order to even get access to Muirfield Drive. And all of our surface runoff and everything will go away from those houses, both the ones on the west and the ones on the south, and exit our site through our drive on the Muirfield place.
Okay, and is that per the drainage plan the city has reviewed in accordance with this final plat?
I can't answer if they've reviewed it, but yes, we submitted it. Yeah.
You submitted, you submitted a final drainage plan to the city that showed the runoff going to Muirfield and not to the south.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Kirksey, does that help you?
It does, to a degree. Is there any way of finding out how far away from my property line are they going to dig and flatten that area so that my wall integrity will be and stay the same?
I don't know the answer to that. Mr. Johnson, do you have an exhibit that would show that?
I do not have it handy, but I'd love to reach out to Mr. Kirksey and go over that with him.
Okay.
One-on-one, and show him how we're going to make that site grade, because he's correct. There's the fairly significant elevation differential there that we took into consideration as part of our design.
Would you mind, to protect Mr. Kirksey's information, since he doesn't appear here every other week like you do, Mr., would you share your phone number or?
Absolutely. I'm Tim Johnson, area code 405-235-8075.
And Mr. Kirksey, that phone number is also available on today's agenda materials at okc.gov. That's the same phone number that appears there. But Mr. Johnson's in agreement. If you'll call him, he's happy to provide that exhibit for your benefit, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cravens. Appreciate it.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, I don't have anybody else who wants to be heard according to the hand raising device. So if there's no further discussion on this, I'd make a motion to approve the variance, but I can't. So if someone would do that, I'd be appreciative.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move approval of the variance to section 5.4.2.E.1 of the subdivision regulations.
I have a motion by Commissioner Pennington and a second, maybe.
Changing it.
Yep. I just need to confirm we're not pausing for lack of a second here. Staff?
We are pausing for lack of a second.
Okay, so if nobody seconds the motion, it's going to fail.
So I'll make a second. I can't do it online for some reason.
It's just waiting right now. There it is.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have a motion and a second to approve the variance to 5.4.2E1 of the subdivision regulations. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner LaForge? And that item passes unanimously. We need the variances. We need a motion on the item, Commissioner Pennington.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of item 8.
I have a motion to approve item 8.
Item 10, right?
Did I have the
I'm
wrong?
sorry. Yep. Thank you, Jeff.
Sorry, 10. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve item 10, C7276. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
And I think Commissioner LaForge is voting online, so we should have all of our votes cast.
I'm waiting on Commissioner LaForge.
Yeah, sorry, and I couldn't find my unmute button. I vote yes, sorry.
That's okay. So now all votes should be cast. And that item is approved unanimously.
Thank
Next
you.
item on today's agenda is item number 11.
Item 11 is case number C7277, preliminary plat of Horn Valley North, located north of Northwest 23rd Street and east of North Sarah Road.
Okay, applicant with us?
Yes, sir. Brad Reed with Craft and Soul here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, anything you want to add to staff's introduction of the item?
So this is a preliminary plat for, it's basically a continuation of the Homestead at Horn Valley subdivision to the south there. We have some access issues with the way the Kilpatrick Turnpike comes in. There's no other side. The Route 66 park is on the other side. There's 4 TEs listed. We agreed all of those. There's a TE for a stub street to the east. Since it's a city park, we didn't think it appropriate to stub into it. We will agree to pedestrian access over there. So we request that variance be granted for that reason.
I think it's a rhetorical question, but staff, was the TE included just because the variance is required? Surely we don't want to put a connection to the city park. You guys don't actually want us to require that connection.
Sarah, did we, I think we did, unless we heard differently from Parks and Recreation. Is Sarah still on?
I think what we settled on was pedestrian connection. Generally, Parks doesn't like open vehicular connections to their park.
Sorry, I was assuming we meant pedestrian connection.
Pedestrian makes.
Are you guys, so you're comfortable with the pedestrian connection, Mr. Beller?
Yes, we can agree to pedestrian connection.
Okay. Mr. Reed, you're good there too, sounds like. So Commissioner Clear, just for your benefit before I turn it over to you, we would need the variance, but it sounds like we'd also need a TE5 to require the pedestrian connection. So with that, I'll turn it over to you for additional comment.
Yeah, it seems like we're a little unclear on that vehicular connection. I'm looking at I'm wondering if the master plan of the park did not have, right now they've got a road over on the east side that starts to come up to the north, and I just don't know if their master plan eventually has that connecting over. So that's my only question. I am all for the pedestrian connection for sure. Just having not seen the master plan of the park, I'd like to confirm that connection is not necessary.
Let me ask a question I fear I know the answer to. Do we have anybody from Parks with us that can answer Commissioner Clare's question?
It was, I can tell you that Parks requested the pedestrian connection, that it be pedestrian only. I don't see them on here, and that was our intent too, planning's intent.
Okay.
Does that give you the comfort you need, Commissioner Clare?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion on this from you, sir?
No, I think it's a good application, and I'm glad that the applicant is providing that pedestrian connection. So I'm ready to make a motion if there's no further discussion.
We'll see if there's anybody here that wants to be heard. This is C-7277. If you wish to be heard on that item today, if you could push Alt-Y on your computer or *9 on your phone. And I do not see anybody. So Commissioner Clare, I think we're ready for a motion subject to those changes to the technical evaluations.
Before we do that, I do have one comment to make. And I understand that access and being directly adjacent to such a fabulous park might be an easy way to forego amenities within the neighborhood. But if that is the case, I see common areas. I don't see any indication of what they are, what's to be done with them. I think one says pond. I would really like to make sure that access is centrally located. This is a lot of housing not to have any, on-site amenities for kids. And I mean, just for me, I would never have let my children go on their own to an adjacent public park like this. So it's not really that much of a benefit, frankly, to young children. I would like to see, some kind of internal amenities to this preliminary plat. And I would like whatever pedestrian access there is to that park to be, located in such a way that it is the easiest possible access for as many people as it can be.
Mr. Reed, if you would, why don't you specify where that pedestrian access is planned so we can notate that for the record? And then also if you'd address the use of the common areas that are outlined on the preliminary plat document itself.
Yeah, so this is actually a continuation of the Homestead at Horn Valley addition to the south. They have a splash pad and an amenity kind of gazebo area. It's the intention that this is, an addition to that subdivision. This actually had a preliminary plat on a long time ago that just never went through. And so this is a continuation of that. There is no connection from the other part of the addition either. So I would say that where ours are located with those ponds, we'd make a pedestrian connection through there. That way it's centrally located for the whole subdivision. It's basically that whole section. So we could give pedestrian access right there where basically our south line is, but that puts it in the middle of the entire subdivision.
Commissioner Powers, does that address your concerns or no?
Well, to some extent. I mean, it's good information to have.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I think we're ready, Commissioner Clare.
Okay, I will move approval of item C-7277 with the following amendments to the changes to the technical evaluation, striking TE2 and adding TE5 that provides a pedestrian connection to Route 66 Park through Common Area C.
Well, I think we need a motion to approve the variance for TE2 in order to allow them not to make the connection as opposed to the deletion.
You're right. I apologize.
That's all right.
All right, I'll move approval of the variance to section 5.3.1.d.5 variance to subdivision regulations.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the variance outlined in TE2 of the staff report. And that motion has, I hope, been, seconded by Commissioner Powers. So please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner LaForge? And the variance is approved unanimously. So Commissioner Clare, we just need a motion on the item itself and
Yes.
adding the TE5.
Yeah, so I'll move approval of item C 7277, adding technical evaluation 5 that provides for a pedestrian connection to Route 66 Park through Common Area C.
Excellent. I have a motion and a second, maybe. Second again from Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner LaForge? Perfect. And that application is approved unanimously. Item number 12.
Item 12 is case number C 7278, preliminary plat of Eagles Glen, located west of South Cemetery Road and north of Southwest 29th Street.
Is the applicant with us?
I am. Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road, on behalf of the applicant. This is a preliminary plat that is in conformance with a recently approved PUD. We agree with all the TEs. We do not need a variance to TE number 2. We will agree to comply with section 5.3.1.d.5 of subdivision regulations requiring a street stub or an easement be provided to the adjacent property.
So you are in agreement with all the technical evaluations, and just to confirm?
Yes, it just says that we're requesting a variance and we are not.
Yeah, you're fine. Okay, so with the agreement to the TE2, I'll just say for the record that the design of the preliminary plat does conform with the subdivision regulations as they relate to the access requirements for subdivisions with 30 lots. Commissioner Coffey, this is your ward, ma'am. Do you have additional concerns on this one or thoughts?
No, I do not. I've not received comments from anyone, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, let's just make sure nobody's here with us today that wants to be heard. This is C7278. If you're joining us today by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. If you're joining us by computer, Alt-Y. I'll pause a moment. Seeing nobody, Commissioner Coffey, unless there's discussion, I think we're ready for a motion just on the item itself, as the technical evaluations have all been agreed to.
I move approval of preliminary plat of Eagles Glen C 7278 with approval of the technical evaluations, eliminating technical evaluation 2.
We don't need to eliminate 2. We need to keep it because the variance isn't required. They're going to meet it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Then
okay.
approval of all technical evaluations 1 through 5.
Excellent. I have a motion from Commissioner Coffey, and I'm just waiting for that motion to populate. If you're joining us by phone and you're wondering why we have long pauses, it's because sometimes the technology is not as cooperative as we would like. So wait a moment. I do have a second from Commissioner Powers, so please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
And I'm assuming Commissioner LaForge is still voting online with us?
Yes.
There he is. That item is approved unanimously. Good luck, Mr. Grubbs. Next item is item 13.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Clare. I wanted to announce that I will be recusing myself from this item and turning off my video, and I'll be back for the next item.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Clare. We appreciate that. Item 13, Mr. Butler.
13 is case number PUD 1810, application to rezone 8113 South Sunny Lane Road from I-1 and I-2 to PUD 1810.
Applicant present?
Yes, sir. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. What you have before you today is a PUD that breaks into 4 different tracks for a mixed use area, primarily used for single family detached housing. And it, as you can see by the image, it's a very strange shaped piece of property surrounding the old Sooner softball courts that have been there since the mid-'80s. Oklahoma City has acquired those, and we have been in conversation with the Parks Department, working through potential access points from the neighborhood, and then possibly some land acquisition by the Parks Department to put in some additional parking to serve this site. The residential portion is the biggest factor, obviously, and staff had asked us to put in a buffer because we butt I-2 on the west and partly on the south, but the R1 that's to our south is currently being utilized for oil wells, oil sites, and piping systems. So the staff has added a TE to change our plant spacing from 30 foot to 20 foot, and we're in agreement with that. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Before I turn over to Commissioner Privet, if Mr. Butler or Ms. Welch could address just at the outset the issue with the comprehensive plan amendment piece that will be coming back if this item were to be approved, so everybody understands what happened there.
Yeah, I'll chip in, and Sarah, feel free to add if you'd like, but that was just so that piece that on the screen is labeled I-2, that was is heavy industrial, and that was just a staff oversight. I think when we checked it, we didn't notice that western part was actually a different land use topology area. So we'll need to bring that back just to clean that up if this is approved.
What's currently on that section? There's a little building there. Is it?
Cindy Lakin, if you could put your cursor over the top of the area that we're talking about, just so all the commissioners are make sure we're following this discussion. There it is right there. So, Commissioner Privet, this is your ward, sir. I'll turn it over to you to lead our discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have many issues. I know it looks like it could be a compatibility nightmare, but I figure anybody moving in here is going to know what they've already got, and there's not much room to add anymore. So I'm good with it.
Okay. I'll just add, we had a brief call. It was Commissioner Privet and myself. Were we the only 2 commissioners on that call? Commissioner Privet, or no? Yeah, we were.
Yep.
So with the applicant on this, and we had the same conversation that we've all had recently, which is my concern. And I just like some comments again from staff on this point, where the housing abuts industrial to the south, and I guess what would be to the west and northwest. Are there any issues created for those industrial users? Is there enough of a buffer being placed and all the compatibility measures being required here that an industrial user would be required to install if they were coming into a butt R1? So they were going to come in and build, and they go to get a permit. Are they going to have any issues associated with that? Because this is again an area where we're introducing residential to, as you can tell by that zoning map, what is a very industrial area generally. Is there anything that we're missing here or that the applicant hasn't included that would affect those industrial users on any side? Anybody?
There would just be the normal building setbacks and height regulations of the zoning district. Like right now, I-2 to I-2, there would be basically nothing. But if it's R1, there'll be building setbacks and height step backs. for buildings.
So in other words, if you're sitting there with 20 acres of I-2 and you come and right now you pull a permit, you can build, basically to the property line. But if now that it's going to be R1, if you want to build, you're going to have to separate further.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any way to mitigate that issue? I mean, what would the owner of that property have to do to avoid that? Get a variance?
Right, variance or rezone.
So that would be a Board of Adjustment variance?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner Cravens, this is Commissioner Highsmith. I had this exact same conversation with the applicant. And to me, it just comes down to, the question of, well, were those adjacent properties noticed? I'm sure they were. And if they were and they got it and they read the,
yeah,
they took the time to read this and understood it, then I guess, to me, like, I get it and I understand your concern. And I really actually do appreciate, like, when you bring this up, because sometimes I tend to miss it. But, just like with any other case, to me, if we don't hear from them, then I consider that them not having a concern. So
yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I agree. I just want to be sure that if there's something we can do that enhances that mitigation, and to the applicant's credit, I think they've done a lot of that. There's a 25-foot setback, which is what staff wanted. So staff made that request. They've, brought the trees in closer together. So they've done some of those things. I just wanted to be sure there wasn't something that we were missing. And I'm just fearful that some applicant's going to come in and want to do something, and they've had industrial land over here for 30 or 40 years, and then all of a sudden they can't do what they want to do. That's a bad outcome, man. And we just see, it's so weird because we didn't really see any of these for a long, long time. And I swear we've had a residential to industrial encroachment in every meeting for like the last 3 months, I feel like. So I just want to make sure we're not missing, because we see more and more of these. I just don't want it to get away from us. So I've had the discussion. Commissioners had time to reflect on it. I don't have any objection to it. I think the applicant's done a fairly good job. I just wanted to reiterate the point. So,
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Pennington. I do want to go ahead and add to the point to this discussion, because I completely agree with everything that's been said by the other commissioners. I think we really do need to have one of those informal discussions, as Commissioner Powers mentioned earlier, about how new home buyers, how are they noticed about this? Because it's not about under the current conditions, assuming all things stay the same, I have no issue with what is planned. But the person who buys that corner lot, and right at the southwest corner of this property, and then the industrial gets sold to somebody else who's going to build something, some serious industrial activity, is going to be right back at the city, right back at us, telling us about how they were told that this lot was always going to stay vacant, or it was always going to stay a pipe storage. And so I think we really do need to do something about this. This is a serious city problem about how we notice new home buyers about their surrounding property. We're going to get to a serious one about this later today. And there really is no real remedy on the back end for the new home buyer. We should fix that.
I think that's fair. Maybe we can dovetail that session into the session that Commissioner Power suggested and kill two birds with one meeting. Maybe we can find another bird we can throw in there and kill it too. So I think that's a great point. I just really want to feel comfortable that we're doing a thoughtful job of approving these applications where we're not creating problems down the road for future folks like us to have to, ferret through. Just be a bad outcome. So as I said, I think the applicant's done a really good job here. At this point, I'll see Commissioner Privet, do you have any other thoughts or comments before I ask for public comment?
I do not.
Okay, so at this point, I'll ask if there's anybody here that wants to be heard on this item. And to Commissioner Highsmith's point, if there is, or if there's not, then that's a pretty good indication. So I don't have anybody. So with that, I think we're ready for a motion if you want to make it, Commissioner Privet.
We do have a hand raised now.
We do? I'm sorry. Yes, we do. Marilyn Lammensdorf?
Yes, yes. Marilyn Lammensdorf with the Planning Department. I just want to say that the Parks Department they are about to go out for RFP and redo those fields to be a kind of a regional collegiate softball complex. And since they're I2, even though they're not a technically, industrial type use, they will be required to screen from this use and to buffer it. And they weren't really planning on doing that.
That's my point.
I don't like that.
I don't like that either. That's not a good outcome. And it's not just because, I serve on the city planning commission and it's the city. It's because I would feel that way if it was anybody. That's not fair I mean, those softball fields have been there for forever. The city made a huge investment to make them economic attractant. And now they're going to have to make changes and spend money, taxpayer money in this instance, that they wouldn't have had to spend but for the introduction of residential. That's the exact kind of problem I'm talking about. So thank you for speaking up, Marilyn. Is there anything that we can do? Do we have tools at our disposal to try to address that or prevent that from being the city's problem?
If anything, it should be on the developer of this property.
Exactly.
Yeah. We need some staff help here. It's awfully quiet. We can't do this on our own.
We need to have a fence there, and it's just a matter of who installs it. I don't have anything more profound to say. I'm not sure if code helps us out at all, JJ, but there's got to be a fence there, and I don't know, Marilyn, if the buffer is enough. I don't know if adding residential, does that add to or have an impact on the field depth that Parks now has to deal with? Oh, are you Marilyn? Or I guess you can't unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Okay. I'm just wondering, and there might be a question for JJ. They don't have a 25-foot buffer on the west side of the ballpark on the residential. And I wonder if they could just, make that go all the way around, and then that would count as their buffer, because they would have a landscape buffer as well. I don't know where they would put it, but I don't know if J&A discussed that with them, with the parking. There's a few unanswered questions here. So.
This is Commissioner Powers. I'm a little baffled by this. Certainly, if the city is going to make this an operating ballpark, they would put a fence around it. I understand that we're trying not to put, more of a burden on them than they would have otherwise. But the applicant has said that they are still discussing possible additional acquisition by the city of land to improve their parking situation and so on. I'm not inclined to try to get in the big middle of this and try to dictate right now at this meeting, how that's going to lay out or who's going to put up what. I think it would be a good idea for them to have whatever buffering at the residents of the residential area, to have whatever buffering they would need from the lights that I imagine operate with a ballpark. And there's clearly going to, just for security, there would have to be some kind of fence around it anyway. So,
there's already a fence around it.
Right. And there's going to be fences on the back of the lots too, right?
Right. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been in conversation with the Parks Department, and to my knowledge, we have not been asked to provide any additional buffer or provide any additional land acquisition along those lots. The discussion for additional land acquisition was more for parking on the northern field.
Yeah, if you're willing to move in next to a softball field, I'd say you have to know what you're getting into with the lights and the possible noise, and
Mike, I totally agree with you on that from the perspective of the home buyer. Yeah. But I would be beside myself with frustration if I had to come in and add cost to a project that somebody else created when I was there first, and I had this land acquired to build this facility when it was in the middle of nothing. and now we're going to put houses all the way around it, that I would be furious. And I
agree with that. I'm just wondering where does that extra fence go? We've got already fences for the houses.
Well, I don't think that, I think what Marilyn was saying is it's not, and I need some, like I said, we're lacking some staff knowledge here. Marilyn, if this isn't you, just tell me it's not you and that's fine. But do you know what would be required from Parks perspective as a result of this abutting residential for lighting and landscaping and all that kind of stuff that you wouldn't have had to do before?
I think it would just be the a 5-foot landscape buffer because they're I2.
So in other words, they'd have to have a 5-foot landscape buffer all the way around the perimeter.
Wherever it's next to residential.
Right. I mean, it literally surrounds you. It's to the south and to the west. So it's both of those property lines.
I think, and let's get some clarification, JJ, only on the developed area, correct?
Right. Only if whatever they develop new.
Wait, Cindy, can you put up this exhibit right here? It's Johnson and Associates exhibit that shows the layout of the lots around the existing softball fields with kind of an aerial. There, no, one more. Yeah, there you go. So, Marilyn, what you're saying is that everywhere we see a lot, the city is going to be required when that develops to come in and put a 5-foot landscape buffer?
Yes, if it's ever redeveloped, yes.
Well, they're about to come in for redevelopment that.
Your side is ever redeveloped, the softball fields.
Right.
They're about to redevelop it, but I don't know if that means they're just gussying up the fields. Would that count as not new development or?
No. Now, if they go up and build a building up at the northwest corner or in tract 3 or 2, they would have to meet all the requirements for that building site, but it's not going to trigger anything for the ball fields.
And those tracks are being left as a heavier industrial type use and a transient lot accommodations. I will point out at the very south end of the ball fields, the closest point to our property line is about 45 feet. Where we are closer on the east side, where you see that cul-de-sac, we've included a buffer of 30 feet there. Because whoever wrote that description and however the city purchased that property, that description runs real close to that outfield fence on that one side, which is not as close to residential as the rest of the property. We're over 100 feet from it on the north field versus our property line. On the west side of the south field, we're 65 feet. So there's plenty of room to have a 5-foot buffer in there.
And Commissioner Cravens, this is Mark Zitzow. We've met with Parks, I think 3 times already and continue to meet with them. Their improvements are to the fields and the parking lot. They're not, to this point, they have not expressed any interest or indication that additional buildings would be built. I have the code pulled up. Based on what I'm looking at for I-2 next to R1, it does not require a 5-foot landscape buffer on their part. There would be a 25-foot setback required for a building structure, but they're not proposing any of that. So when the home builders come in and they build the home and put up the new fence, there shouldn't be any additional requirements on the park side. But even then, we're continuing to work with them, and there's going to be some give and take between our developer and the parks department that's going to create some other benefits for these ball fields, like access and additional parking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Zitzow. I appreciate that. We were really close to a motion. I guess what I would say is does staff have any other comments or concerns on this? Because this is kind of it. Okay, Commissioner Privet, I think we're ready for a motion.
Make a motion to approve PUD 1810, subject to technical evaluation number 1.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I do, from Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
All votes should have been cast. And the application is approved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next item is item 14. Commissioner Claire, if you can hear us, you're welcome to rejoin us.
Item 14 is PUD 1811, application to rezone 13335 Northeast 50th Street from R1 to PUD 1811.
Okay, is the applicant with us? Let the record reflect Commissioner Claire has rejoined us by video. Applicant with us? Just in case, because it's been a minute, *6 will unmute your phone, spacebar on your computer. I see somebody's raised their hands, and it looks like the applicant has raised his hands. Mr.
Yes.
Edwards?
Yes.
I can
Yes.
hear Mr. Little and Mr. Edwards, so one of you needs to mute and the other one needs to tell me what you want us to know about this application.
Okay, I'm muting. Okay, this is Mr. Little. No, this is just my property. I've already been before you guys before. I was going to switch it over to agriculture, but instead I was told it'd probably be better if we just went ahead and switched it to a PUD. That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Pennington, this is your ward, sir. Do you have questions or comments or thoughts on this one?
Thank you. I've been working with the developer and Councilwoman Nice. The issue was wanting to make sure that we could more confine the operations that the developer has in mind. And so we sent him, the city council sent him back to work with our staff to go back and redo the PUD so that there weren't any of those compatibility issues. I'm in support of the application. I think it's great. And I do think, I did get an email from Commissioner Powers, so I'd love to hear her concerns. But I'm in support.
Commissioner Pennington, real quick, my only question on this, and I'll get Commissioner Powers' comment, is staff recommends that we should, and they're incorporated into the TEs, the increased setbacks and the tree preservation. You're in agreement with those recommendations from staff?
Absolutely, assuming that the developer, this is included in the discussions with the developer as well.
Right. Mr. Little, are you in agreement with the technical evaluations as shown in the staff report?
Yes.
Okay, great. Commissioner Powers, what are your concerns on this one?
My concerns are this doesn't strike me as a great place for retail sales. I don't have any problem with the growing or processing, but the sales part of it, no, I can't support that.
Is sales listed here?
Well, my staff report says the application to permit a marijuana grow, processing, and sales operation. I don't see that the specific use units that are listed would encompass that, and that was my question to Commissioner Pennington.
The use unit is not listed in the PUD application, so I assume that's just language that was sort of included loosely by staff. Staff, could you confirm that, please?
That's right. This would not allow like a dispensary or anything like that. It would be wholesale sales of the product grown, and processing, but it wouldn't allow dispensary retail sales.
Okay, thank you.
You bet, of course. That's a great question. Commissioner Pennington, any other comments?
No, sir.
Okay, let's see. I don't have anybody signed up to speak except for the two folks, or when I say signed up, I mean with hands raised, except for the two people I called on initially. If there are other folks that want to be heard on this item today, this is PUD 811, and it would be
1811, Mr. Chairman, 1811.
Thank you. 1811. *9 on your phone or Alt-Y on your computer, and I'll pause just a second. Doesn't look like I have anybody else. So I think we're ready for a motion.
I move approval of PUD 1811.
I have a motion and A second from Commissioner Coffey. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. All votes should be cast. And that application is approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item is item 15, Mr. Butler.
Item 15 is case number PC 10717, application to rezone 11925 Holland Street from PUD 605 to I3.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant with us? If so, if you'll, you can either just unmute with *6 or spacebar. There we go. Got a raised hand. So if you'll push *6, sir, and start by giving us your name and address for the record. Spacebar if you're on your computer. I'll just unmute you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, what we're trying to do is we are a
Sir, could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
yeah, my name's Alfredo Contreras, and the address, it's the one you mentioned above, 11925 Holland Street.
What's your address, sir?
My address is 2537 Southwest 33rd Street. That's Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73119.
Thank you very much. Tell us what you want us to know.
Basically, what we're a pumping company, concrete pumping company, and what we're just trying to do is to set up a small concrete plant to basically sell our own concrete to our own customers that we sell the pumping service. And right now we're having a lot of residential customers trying to get their concrete, but big concrete companies are pretty backed up right now. So we're not trying to sell it to the public. It's just when we offer the service of the pumping.
Understood. Thank you very much. Commissioner Pennington, this is your ward, sir.
Yes, I'm not sure if the developer, have you read the staff report about your application?
Have I read it? I haven't got a report on it.
Okay, well, the report, your request is a straight zoning request to I3, which has a certain set of uses that are allowed. The concern that staff has, which is outlined in the report, is about whether the uses that would be allowed by I3, not necessarily the specific use that you have in mind, but just those that are allowed by I3 are not compatible with the other uses that are happening all around the property. What would be more appropriate, in my opinion, is if this was converted to a PUD and we were able to make some changes to mitigate any potential issues that your use that you have in mind specifically might cause to the nearby properties. But because I wanted to give commissioners the chance to weigh in about their own specific concerns, I didn't ask for a continuance. I just wanted the chance for everybody to say their piece about it, so that if I'm wrong and that the commission doesn't think that we could work through this, which I think we can, given what the applicant actually has in mind, then I just wanted to give the commission the chance to weigh in. So, Mr. Chairman, I absolutely think this needs to be sent back and turned into a PUD that has very clear standards and very clear mitigation for all the other uses, for all the other neighboring properties. So that's my recommendation. But and that's
great.
And we are open to any of your recommendations. We can go green. We can, we're open to anything that you guys recommend if it's possible, and if not, we're okay. But we're just open to anything. Hopefully, we can get this going.
Appreciate it.
Commissioners, this is Commissioner Powers. I will say that this application has been before us before, not that long ago, but I have a tendency to kind of be a little fuzzy in my brain. I don't know whether all of you were involved in that or not. It doesn't note anywhere in the staff report how long ago that was. But it was when this property was in Ward 2, so maybe that dates it. And I worked with Mr. Contreras. I was really hoping to help them accomplish what they needed to do here, because they're, a minority business owner, and we're all in favor of supporting that. But even with it being presented at that time as a PUD, and even though we have since, so before we have done the things we've now done to reinforce residential development in this area, it was not approved as a batch plant. There are limitations on what we can do, even through a PUD. We cannot tell them who they can sell to and who they can't, or who they can provide this product to or who they can't. This roadway is perfectly substantial and well-maintained and all of that for what they have now. Maybe not so much for concrete trucks pulling in and out of there. I have some real reservations and would definitely like to hear from other commissioners. Since that time, we have done some things, as I said, to reinforce and encourage the residential aspects of development in this area. So concrete bench plant, no matter how you limit it or what you do to it, it is what it is. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
I agree with that. I think it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to get to a point where I'm going to support a batch plant here. We had this very long conversation on PUD 275, which is not PUD 275 anymore, but we had this long conversation about the RV park and how it was a step down from the intensity of the hotels on the front, and then you've got these industrial, and then you had this, and then you got the neighborhood. And we just finished doing a plat northwest of here. If we agree that we want to give some time to try, I'm never opposed to that. I don't think I'm going to get there, but if in that intervening period, go buy a batch plant, and particularly this week while it's windy, and stand there while they're producing and decide how comfortable you can get here. You're not going to get me there. It's just not going to work. But that doesn't mean that there won't be 5 votes that get there, Commissioner Pennington. And I love the fact that you handled it that way. And I think that if he wants to try, that's the applicant's right. My feedback would be a batch plant here. I can't get behind that. Other commissioners have thoughts or feedback they want to provide to the applicant? Okay. That's not
my
very
lack of professional knowledge about a batch plant definitely creates a barrier. But I'm always of the mind to say if the applicant is willing to go back and try to work with staff, and I'm happy to be a part of those discussions to see what we can do, if anything, then I'm happy to do it rather than just outright deny the application.
I'm fine with that. And by the way, Commissioner Payne, this would be in your ward, west of I-235 on 122nd, right before you get back to Santa Fe. There's a batch plant near the railroad tracks on the south side of the road. I believe it's a Matheny concrete batch plant. Drive by that one. That'll give you a good indication of what you're dealing with here. I'd be happy to give the applicant a continuance if they're willing to take it, or if the applicant wants to, we can try to put it to a vote. This is really your decision, sir.
If I could ask for, oh, sorry.
Were there any complaints? I mean, was there anybody signed up that was against this?
I'm happy to ask that question, Commissioner Hinkle. It's a great question. Is there anybody that would like to be heard on this matter today? This is PC 10717. And I don't see anybody raising their hand. So, no.
We didn't have anyone signed up.
Thank you, Cindy.
If I could ask, if you do choose to continue this and do a PUD, as mentioned in the staff report, staff is having a hard time figuring out a way to make this compatible, even if it were a PUD, just because we've got all that residential or the new RV park right next door. So if there are ideas as to how we could help compatibility, that would be appreciated. I mean, we could have, if there were giant trees between the two, that would help, but that'll take years to happen. So
I can't believe they're not here, to your point. Honestly, that makes no sense to me at all. This would be very detrimental to their operation. So, applicant, it's your turn to make a call here. We can push the matter forward today and vote, or you can take a continuance. I will say, just for the purpose of the clarification, if you take a continuance to do a PUD, it'll have to be renoticed. So, staff, would that be 4 or 6 weeks?
Let's go with 4 weeks.
Okay, and that would put us, what's that first meeting in April?
April 8th.
Thank you, April the 8th.
Thank you.
Mr. Contreras, would you like to take a continuance to April the 8th or have your item voted on here today?
Well, my grandpa always say, let's take the war to the end. So we'll just hope for the best. And I mean, let's keep going. See if, we get a chance to go in.
So you want us to vote on the matter today?
I would do the continuance to see if I can get that PUD going. I mean, if it's possible.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm just going by your recommendations. I'm not going to sit here and say, you're going to do this or that. I mean, it's just whatever you guys think it's the best, it will be the best for me too.
Okay.
Well, let's be clear to the applicant here what we've said, because I think what I've heard at least is that it's unlikely, even if you go in the PUD direction.
He's not going to get me there, but I'm not going to speak for any other commissioner on that, and I'm not going to try to prevent the applicant from working through that process to try to use the property the way they want to. I'm not going to get there on a batch plan.
I understand. I'd hate for this applicant to go back and do a lot of effort and spend a lot of money on a PUD or a SPUD process, only to come back and get the exact same answer if we know today that that's how we would vote.
I
Well,
agree
then
with
vote
you.
your opinion. I mean, that's the only way he's going to know.
Is it me or does it seem awfully small for a batch plant? Pat
Very
said-
small for a batch plant.
Yeah, most of them I've seen are.
Now we do have well, my dad is the owner of one side, and my uncle owns the other half of would be the south side of it's the same new building. So he's willing to rent us the whole property, so it could be just, I don't know, one property.
So now it's a bigger batch plant.
But I'm not gonna say I need a little plant and then a few years later make it big. We just want us to sell to our own customers that we're using for the pump services. As we work a lot with Tinker, is our main customer. We do their run some of the
Mr. Contreras, I really respect that. As was articulated to you earlier by Commissioner Pennington, the struggle that we have there is that we can't make decisions based on the user for today. We're creating a zoning for a property that's going to follow it forever until it's rezoned. So the next person, to Commissioner Power's point, that comes along could very well sell from there, could very well enhance the size of the operation, change how it works, and there's nothing the city could do to control or regulate it. That's the challenge we're faced with. I don't want to belabor it. I think Commissioner Highsmith's point is well taken. I was trying to speak up, and I would encourage other commissioners to do so Mr. Contreras can decide later if he'd like to withdraw it. I'm not going to be able to get there. That's just my opinion. If he wants to take the opportunity, I'm happy to give him that. I can't get there. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak up.
From a procedural standpoint, Mr. Chairman, why don't we do this? Why don't I just make the motion for the continuance? And then for my commissioners, if you're not going to get there, vote no on the continuance. And then I'll make another motion for us to move the application forward to City Council.
I love it. I think that's a great idea. I'll take that motion.
I move to continue item 15 to the first April meeting of the commission.
Be April the 8th, just for purposes of the record. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion's been seconded. Please cast your votes when available. Commissioner Hinkle?
No.
Commissioner Hinkle has voted nay. All votes have been cast, and it has failed. So now we would just need to make a motion on the item because the request for continuance has failed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the application, item 15 be denied.
So we're making a recommendation to City Council to deny PC 10717. Please cast your votes when available. Motion was seconded by Commissioner Privet. Excuse me. Now you can cast your votes. And again, a vote in the affirmative is a vote to deny the application, just to be certain. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes should be cast. And the application, the recommendation to denial is unanimous. I'm sorry, Mr. Contreras. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item 16.
Item 16 is case number PUD 1809, application to rezone 1002 Southwest 138th Street from PUD 1480 and R1ZL to PUD 1809.
Very quickly, before we begin introduction, Mr. Contreras, just comes to my mind, just FYI, this application is still going to go to city council. That was a recommendation to deny. So it will still go to city council and you can be heard at that meeting as well on your item, just to be clear.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Butler.
David Box 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, Kendall Dillon, the civil engineer for the project, also with me. To start, I do want to announce that if you look at the screen, you see the eastern half, it's a bit more than half, but the eastern half of this application where it says R1ZL, we are withdrawing the request for that. It is already zoned R1ZL, so there's no need to put it into the PUD. It's a bit of a strange application. Cindy, could you display?
Mr. Box, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So just to confirm, what's labeled on the exhibit in front of us is PUD 1480. There's a line that goes north and south in between those two tracks. The only thing that would be before us now is PUD 1480 being rezoned to R1ZL.
That's right. Everything else to the east of that dark line is already R1ZL and is not needed.
Okay, and just procedurally, that doesn't require any change given that that's what was noticed or anything?
No, because we're shrinking the legal and not expanding.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Gotcha. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're okay. So this application, Cindy, if you can keep going to the color, or right there. So this application, this property came through years ago. Janice was the only one that is still here. It was a very, very contentious application. We got a lot of protests from a lot of people outside. Ultimately, it was approved. Then after that, there was a large fight with an oil and gas company. The oil and gas company acquired the area that's outlined in blue before you, and also that area that we just removed from the application. That oil and gas company has now gone under. My client reacquired the subject tract from them. And the reason I mention that is, Cindy, if you can go back to the original plat, or maybe forward. Yeah, right there. So, no, excuse me, keep going. Keep going. It's the colored one I sent you, Cindy. Right there. So the blue, you see where it says existing R1, and you see two streets that are coming from the west into that existing R1. If you look back at the aerial now, Cindy, I'm so sorry to do this. If you could go back to the blue. So it didn't develop like that because the oil and gas company acquired that property. And so where there were streets became lots. And so there is no ability to bring that street in from the west anymore. And so all of the stuff to the east of the subject site is already R1ZL. And as you can tell from the aerial, is being developed at the moment. And so it wouldn't make sense to put R1 lots in a street full of R1ZL. You get into appraisal problems, you get into consistency problems of the products being offered. And so because everything is kind of walled off to our north and to our west and to our south, it makes logical sense for this to be R1ZL, to have that continuum from east to west and then going up north. So the PUD is just trying to get this from the R1 to the R1ZL, consistent with what will be developed or is being developed to the east. There were some protest letters that came in. I can tell you that the sales team from Home Creations has set a meeting for Monday at 1:30. The contention is that they were of the belief that there would never be anything developed on this site. I'm not sure if there was miscommunication, but of course it was zoned already. It's zoned today. And not only that, there was a preliminary plat.
Mr. Box, not to interrupt you again, but we hear testimony like this sometimes, and I'm indifferent about whether you say they didn't say it or if the protestants say they did. It's really not relevant to us today because nobody can make a commitment that land is never going to be developed. That's why people come get zoning. So let's just skip that.
Yeah, fair enough. So R1ZL, there are no technical evaluations. It's consistent with the area. It's compatible with the existing development pattern. And we'd ask for your approval and be happy to answer any questions.
Before I turn over to Commissioner Hinkle, I'd also just, Commissioner Powers, you and I were on the Board of Adjustment at the same time when the Trey Resources thing came through. I think it was for variances. Is that right?
At the time, the state law had not changed, and in order for an oil and gas operator to obtain the right to drill, he or she had to obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Okay, I just want to make, that's what it was. Thank you. I've got it. Okay, Commissioner Hinkle, this is your ward. Sir, if you want to lead our discussion.
I've looked through I drove through the neighborhood yesterday and I've seen what they're starting and doing now with the existing R1 ZL lots. And I think this is an okay project. I don't have any heartburn about it at all.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. Frankly, you've got R1 ZL to the east that was previously rezoned. The circumstances surrounding the property changed but anybody else have comments before I ask for members of the public? Anybody feel differently about this?
Well, I completely, obviously, I agree with the assessment that was made by the chairman and Commissioner Hinkle. Ultimately, because we deal with this every 2 weeks, and this is routine.
Yep.
But this is back to the same issue I brought up with the housing next to the baseball fields. How we give notice to property buyers about what is the zoning nearby their property is really an important issue that we need to figure out how we're going to handle it for the future. My other question is from a legal perspective. And so I don't know if it's Susan or who is on with us, because I know what we're about to hear about from our neighbors. And I feel for them. I understand their frustration. But for the record, are we allowed to take into consideration property values, the changes in people's property values, what that's going to mean for their property values? What at all are we allowed to use? How are we allowed to use that criteria as we are about to decide how to vote on this application?
You can take into consideration the value of a budding property.
Okay. So if anybody, we can take anything that anybody has in the record about how this might ultimately change the value that their house is going to be appraised.
I think you would need some evidence, appraisal evidence or something like that to base that on if that was going to be the way you wanted to go. Just people coming down and saying, this is going to detract from my property values, I don't think is sufficient evidence to warrant your taking action on that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Commissioner Bington, just one thing that's sort of like off topic, but just to make this point, in case they're neighbors, we're not going to have that discussion either because it's a private issue, but the real issue lies, unfortunately, typically most often with either home sales folks or with realtors who are the major culprit, who will point to a piece of property and say, this is a field, or this is a nature reserve, or this is owned by the city, or this is, common area that can't be built on. And unfortunately, those are private issues that, if someone could develop enough information to have a private cause of action, so be it. But there's no way for the city to undertake noticing. I mean, you live in a neighborhood and you've got housing all around you. I don't think that it would be appropriate to ask somebody at the city to change an ordinance, or in this case, a state statute, to improve notice if residential might get built next to residential. That's the industrial thing I totally get. And I wonder if there are some tools that could be used for something like that. But as it relates to this is just this is a problem that really exists and it lives and dies at the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission, not at the Oklahoma City Planning Commission.
It's a good point that, we are talking about residential with residential. So, but I think some days, Mr. Chairman, I get tired of us being the villain,
Yeah.
And we're put in this position where we have a mandate from the city. We have limited authority with which to act, and we'll be acting consistent with our authority if we approve this application, well within what the law tells us we're allowed to do. And yet we're going to have angry neighbors who think that we don't care what they think. We don't care about their homes. We don't care about the value. And the reality is we do. But we are not, this is not the place that they can get relief. And so I just wanted to be very clear.
Yeah, I want to steal Commissioner Highsmith's thunder and say that, he has asked repeatedly on, I can recall a dozen occasions for somebody, anybody to provide evidence and information, to Mr. Brummett's point, objective evidence that would indicate a property value change, and no one has ever produced any such evidence to him. I've asked for it several times because I've stolen that from him, and no one has ever produced any such evidence to me either. So it's very hard to objectively determine how a property value may be impacted by any development, whether that's residential or commercial. It's kind of like the Sonic backing up to a house today. Does that really affect the property value? I doubt it. And finding evidence to support that would be, I think, very difficult. So,
and look, I'm going to add in here that I drove through the whole neighborhood twice yesterday, and the neighborhood's a beautiful, well done neighborhood, beautiful homes, well taken care of, but it's not built out yet. So there's no way the developer is going to come in and put in trash while he's still got the rest of his neighborhood to develop as it should. So I'm excited to see this actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other comments before I turn it over to folks who've joined us from the public? Okay. Oh, was that a commissioner? Nope. All right. So at this point, I've got a couple people who have raised their hand, be *6, and I'll call on Kara S. And Kara S., you submitted a letter to us, I believe. Kara Smith. Ms. Smith, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. If you'd start by giving us your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it, and we'd love your information you want to give us today.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kara Smith, and my address is 1024 Southwest 138th Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. In relation to the affected area, my lot is number 1 of 138th Street of this zone, of this new request for the, I understand we're looking at the PUD application, right? PUD 1809, not the preliminary plat application. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, my concerns with that, and I know I've heard comments from the commissioners with regard to not being able to make future assertions as to property development. But I think there are several factors that distinguish that blanket statement from what's happening in this particular case. So I purchased my home in 2017, May of 2017. And as the history was given with regard to this property that's subject to this PUD 1809, at the time I purchased my home, Home Creations did not own this property, nor had any master development plan been within their property ownership. The 1480 and any previous zoning had occurred prior to this property being sold to the Trey Resources Oil Company. And so at the time of 2017, I, as well as other owners, asked specifically about this vacant area, not to a previous owner, not to a subsequent owner, but we asked of Home Creation, who is now the applicant for this particular PUD 1809, specifically what was their plans with regard in the future for this particular area. Going into buying or purchasing a home, this was not the only neighborhood I could have purchased in. I had a multiple amount of neighborhoods that I had considered purchasing in. And specifically, I had wanted to move away from a neighborhood that I had sold my previous house from that was a starter neighborhood who had homes of 1,200, 1,300 plus around that area, homes who were stacked on top of each other and was crowded and compacted. I was looking to move to a neighborhood that was more spread out, had natural resources around it. And what attracted me to this neighborhood was the wooded area. And with this vacant property being there, I specifically asked that information with regard to what the plans were of Home Creations, not of any subsequent or future owner. And the information I was provided was that would not be developed with housing. If there was any development, there would be trails and green space area for the neighborhood put there. There was going to be some commercial that was closer to southwestern, which was understandable because it was already listed as commercial, which was some distance away from my home and which was not the property that was owned by Trey Resources. It actually had been maintained to be owned by Home Creations. So that property was understood that there would be some development there, but that area in between there would remain undeveloped. If anything is developed there, it would maintain the wooded area that is currently there. So if you look at the mapping, the houses at line 138th, behind those houses is a wooded area. And that area was proposed, that was stated to me that it would remain and that area would not be developed with housing. The area to my immediate east would not be developed with housing. And under those bases, did I move forward with purchasing my home? I was not just told this, my neighbors were told this. Neighbors were told this all the way up through neighbors who just purchased their home months ago. So from a period of time from 2017 all the way to months ago, Home Creations is still telling people that that area was not going to be developed and that wooded area would remain. And so what I would say about this application in terms of this PUD 1809 is that to grant the application is inconsistent and to the detriment of my property. I know there's been statements about having some evidence with regard to it, but I think common sense, and I'm speaking in terms of a homeowner and a resident, common sense speaks to when people are making decisions about buying homes and how much money they're going to spend for their home, they take into account what the neighborhood looks like. And so this neighborhood is no longer going to look the way that it does now. And I know one of the commissioners said they drove through the neighborhood, but the housing that's going to be put in this area is going to be the housing that is at the area that is not subject to this request. It is at the area off 100 South 139th Street, which are 1,200 to 1,300 square foot homes. And no matter what you do to these homes, they're not going to look like our homes that are in this section that I reside. And in fact, the section I reside was also represented to me that it was a side that was more spacious and more custom homes would be placed. The sections to the south of me that are on Southwest 140th or
60 seconds, Ms. Smith, just so you know.
Excuse me?
60 seconds, just so you know.
Okay, so I just think my statement speaks for itself. I didn't know I had a time limit, so I might, if I could ask for more time, because I was not told I had a time limit.
Well, let me see if we've got other folks that'd like to be heard from today, and I'll circle back to you, Ms. Smith. I want to know if there's anything other than property values and promises of keeping property undeveloped that we need to be aware of as a commission, and I'll be happy to circle back to you.
Okay, well, I do have something about the local wildlife there that's in there, but I have some other things, so yes.
Yeah, we allow applicants and protestants a total of 5 minutes in accordance with our bylaws. I actually given you 5 already, so I was trying to give you the extra 60 seconds, but I'll circle back to see if there's anything you'd like to add. I also see an Alex Lopez. Mr. or Mrs. Lopez, are you with us?
Yeah, hello, this is Alex Lopez. Can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Lopez. If you'd start by giving us your name and address for the record, and then if there's anything else we need to hear about, we haven't heard from already, about that we've already heard about already, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, my name is Alex Lopez. I live at 13804 Calabria Trail, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73170. I wholeheartedly agree with Kara. Everything she said was spot on. Now, again, the point, if the developer would have presented Mr. Box's, can we go back to Mr. Box's picture that he had pulled up with the homes? The color?
Yep, she's working on it. Go one more, I think. That
okay.
one?
If that would have been presented to me, I would have said no. I would have not even have considered this neighborhood.
Okay, actually, Mr. Lopez, on that point, one question for you, Mr. Box. PUD 1480, when was that approved?
2013, 2014. It was approved before dirt turned on the site. The image you see before you was approved before the first home was ever sought to be constructed on the site.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Then why is Home Creations not presenting this and giving false statements to
Mr. Lopez,
their
if you
buyer?
direct your comments to the commission, we'd appreciate it. What I'm trying to evidence, and this is the comment that I wanted to make, I'm not being insensitive to either you or Ms. Smith's frustration at all. The challenge is that we as a commission simply cannot arbitrate and have no way to know what was and was not said in conversations that occurred. And this is something that happens, which is why I made the point at the outset. It happens all the time. We hear this.
Mr. Craven?
Just a second, Mr. Lopez. We hear this about every other meeting that a realtor told me this would never happen.
Yeah, I heard you and and Kamal say that earlier, but you're not saying, what you're not listening is that it's an entire neighborhood. Our entire neighborhood that purchased homes here was told that. How can you be insensitive to an entire neighborhood? I can go door to door.
What I know is that what we have to rely upon is that there are public records that the city produces. There's a city zoning map. There are things that people have the ability to investigate. And since 2013, if someone would have looked, this property was zoned and could have been developed as single family housing all the way back to that point. And so we don't, because all that's going to happen, Mr. Lopez, is if I, and we don't have the ability to do this, but if we drug the people from Home Creations in here, all they're going to say is they didn't say it. And we can't make a zoning decision based on whether they did or they didn't say that.
Well, can you make a base zoning decision based on what 80 neighbors say?
No, I can make a base zoning decision on a number of objective criteria. And those are things like, is the development compatible with the existing development in the area?
It is not.
If you've been listening with us today, you've heard us talk about that at length on other issues. I can address whether or not there are density issues or traffic concerns based on streets.
Okay, I'll address this question to Mr. Hinkle. Mr. Hinkle, you say you've driven through the neighborhood. Did you notice the smaller unit homes off the middle entrance to Palermo? Mr. Hinkle?
Yes, I saw the homes under
Okay, are
construction.
those consistent with the other homes built in the neighborhood?
Sir, I don't think you understand what Commissioner Cravens is saying. If Cindy can go back to the map, those homes they're building now have been legal to build since the neighborhood was incepted. The only thing they're doing here is just adding the same zoning across the street. That RZL that is not in the subject site has been RZL since the inception. I'm sorry that you're angry, and
We've got a Travis Basson that works for Home Creations, actually lives in our neighborhood, just in a cul-de-sac down from mine. Now, he just learned that he was one of the ones that was telling all our neighbors that it'll never be built on. It's got oil filled, it's an oil filled property. It's got pipes running underneath it. And, and he says this, he just learned of this so he's an employee and he just learned of this.
Mr. Lopez, the one thing I will say is if you have conversations, recorded conversations in writing and things like that, those are, private issues that you certainly can explore taking some action there. Those actions would not be something that the commission can consider. And if you have things like that, I would encourage you to, retain legal counsel and get advice. But
you guys sound corrupt. I'm finished. I'll just sell my house.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lopez. I don't have anybody else who has their hand raised. So Ms. Smith, I want to keep my word and circle back to you to see if you have other points you want to interject.
And you're currently muted.
Here, can you hear me now?
I can, yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Only thing that I probably did want to add, to what I've previously already stated, and I certainly agree with with Alex Lopez and his comments there. But I wanted to add that it is within the commission's authority to make sure that plan unit development is consistent with the ordinances. And a part of that, it requires the purpose of those plan unit developments is to encourage to make sure innovative land development while maintaining appropriate limitations, maintains the character intensity of use, permits the flexibility of development and maximizes it. It also requires that you make sure wooded areas are preserved and things like that. And there's things within this area that have not been preserved that should it should minimize the effects on the surrounding property. It should contribute to the revitalization or redevelopment of the areas. And so this was not plotted to have 12 or 1,300 homes within it. It was plotted for a minimum square footage of 1,700 square foot. And that is a vast difference. And majority of the homes on 135 are well in excess of that, well in excess of this, even the 1,700. There's only a few homes within that area that are 1,700 square foot. So I think in terms of make sure it's not impacting the surrounding areas, this PUD does not do that. This PUD incorporates homes all the way in the back of my home and the neighbors down 138 that were not intended, or the original platting for this, if you even look at 1480, doesn't even include lots this small. The lots in the original master development plan in 1480 for the areas behind my home to the south that's subject to this PUD 1809 were larger lots. They were going to house these larger houses. They were not going to house these 12 and 1,300 square foot homes. You do have the authority to make sure that the developer and the builder are being consistent in the construction of our neighborhood. You do have the authority for safety and crowding concerns for the enjoyment of our neighborhood. You do have those types of authorities to make sure that's the case. And you do have the authority to make sure they preserve wooded areas, maintain local wildlife. Those are all within your authority to do. And they're going to destroy this wooded area and this local wildlife that we all come. It was a part of the reasons for us to buy there that we have been enjoying. I've been enjoying for 4 years. Some of my neighbors less than that, but we've all enjoyed all the wildlife that's there. There's no plan to relocate that local wildlife. There's no plan. They're going to just knock down all those trees. And I think that's part of the requirements that those types of things are maintained, especially within PUDs. I mean, specifically in your ordinances, it says that the master plan is to minimize any negative or impact on development of adjacent sites or roadways, to be to complement existing development of adjacent properties, to develop an arrangement of open space of natural features of the site that will be desirable and functional to the patrons, pedestrians, and occupants. And it says preserve unique natural resources such as vegetation, water courses, natural rock droppings, wooded areas, and it goes on and on and on. All these things are within your, you may not be able, I'm not asking that nothing be allowed to be done in this area, because I know as a homeowner, I cannot probably can't ask you to do that. But I can ask you, and I pray that you do so and hear what we're saying, because Home Creations has not been honest with you nor I, and making and amending, requiring them to modify what they proposed here to be consistent with the things you can do. And that is make sure wooded areas are preserved, make sure the homes are consistent and the neighborhood is consistent. We're not looking at something that is affordable housing and you're trying to make affordable housing for people. So you want to have a corporate, which I am all about affordable housing, but this is not an affordable housing project.
Ms. Smith.
Building these homes at an extreme price.
Ms. Smith, we understand your concerns and we understand your comments. I want to turn this discussion now over to the commission, if I may, and I'm going to start that process by doing a couple of things. You're absolutely right. We do have some of the abilities that you referenced, and let me tell you what's outlined in our staff report. First thing is that the proposed development, we're told, is within the UL LUDA range, so it's within the density range that the city staff would like to see for to basically be compatible and in line with the comprehensive plan. We're told that it's in line from a connectivity standpoint. We're told that the proposed 4,000 from a compatibility basis, the proposed 4,000 square foot lots are slightly smaller than the 60% or 4,200 square foot lots recommended in the comprehensive plan. However, no compatibility issues are identified. We're told the PUD requests 60% lot coverage on smaller lots and will comply with the landscaping required by R1 development and our ordinance and codes. We're told that the environmentally sensitive areas that apply to this development site, riparian areas non-applicable, and upland forest not applicable. So I think we understand the two protestants' comments. Commissioner Hinkle, do you have additional thoughts on this you want to share before I ask for feedback from other commissioners?
Be interested to hear what Mr. Box has to say about the two complaints.
Well, I mean, what specifically, what would you like to know?
Reiterate what you said in the beginning about how this was zoned to begin with. Because in my mind, it was already zoned all this, and all this could happen prior to the oil field getting sold. And then the oil field got bought back and they just rezoned it the same way that it started out to be.
So this was zoned.
Am I off base?
It was zoned in July of 2013, the entirety, where Ms. Smith's house is, where Mr. Lopez's house is, all of that was zoned in July of 2013. Subsequent to that, the oil company.
Wait. Zoned to be big lots or big lots and small lots?
There's no big lots within the entirety.
Okay, the R1 and the R1ZL, was it zoned that way in the beginning?
There is a portion of R1 and a portion of R1ZL. The small area that Cindy has shown the exhibit that outlined in blue was originally zoned R1. Because the balance of the neighborhood developed in a manner that no longer allowed the connection, we're simply trying to take that small portion and make it R1ZL, consistent with what is immediately to the east.
And let me interject one point here. This is something that I see that hasn't been said that I think is worth mentioning. Because that dispute, which I recall pretty vividly between Trey Resources and the developer, resulted in this tract being removed and sold to Trey, they were forced to develop the neighborhood around that tract, not believing that they would ever have a chance to get that back. So your choices here are, in my view, two things. You can leave an undeveloped piece of property, completely undeveloped piece of property here, or you can create a connection from what is existing R1ZL and put property taxes and all kinds of stuff in the ground there for schools and everything else. To me, that's part of the balance that we have to make and consider is what would the argument be for leaving an undeveloped tract? And you have other legal issues too here, which I would let municipal council weigh in on, about denying this. What zoning would you allow here? If you're going to deny residential zoning in a location like this, are you going to approve commercial? What could an owner reasonably be permitted to do if not residential?
And I would further add that obviously within the first rezone, we found that R1ZL was compatible next to R1. So
right.
I really struggle with all the points made by the protestants. I apologize to them. This is not to belittle their arguments. We hear these a lot, and I'd love, if there's a misunderstanding with our point of view, to sit down and talk through at length with those protestants on, why we are consistent here on the Planning Commission in our thoughts and views on these items. But yeah, to me, I have no problem here. I just don't see, we've got two very passionate protestants, but I mean, we see this same thing all the time. And to me, this is cut and dry, completely cut and dry.
Do other commissioners have different feelings or thoughts? This would be the appropriate time to share those. Okay, well, I mean, if that's true, Commissioner Hinkle, where are you on this thing? Are you ready to make a motion? Do you need additional information? Do you have other concerns we haven't addressed?
No, I'll move approval on the item.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Mr. Cravens, do you see Ms. Kara Smith's hand again?
I do not. Hang on a second. Hold the second if someone's going to make it here. Ms. Smith, I'm going to give you 60 seconds, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add for the commissioner's consideration that Mr. Box acknowledged that Home Creations did tell the owners, their salespersons did tell the owners that it would not be developed. So did make those statements?
Okay. Again, not an issue that we can litigate as a commission. If that's true, Ms. Smith and Mr. Lopez, I do encourage you to, seek legal counsel and get representation for those private issues. We just can't litigate them here. I really am sorry. I don't know what else to say. We cannot litigate that particular issue because we don't know and it's not within our purview. So I had a motion on the floor, which I'll accept at this point from Commissioner Hinkle. I'll wait for a second. The motion has been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. It's a recommendation for approval to City Council on PUD 1809. Commissioner Hinkle, how do you vote?
Yes, please.
I believe all votes have been cast, and that application is recommended to City Council for approval unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 17, which I believe is an accompanying item. Preliminary plat C7274, Mr. Butler.
Yes, it's preliminary plat of Preliminary Place, addition section 6, and it's located west of Southwestern Avenue and south of Southwest 134th Street.
Yeah, once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Kendall Dillon, the civil engineer, also still with us. This is the accompanying preliminary plat. There are 3 technical evaluations, and we agree with each of those. It is consistent with the subdivision regulations and the PUD that was just recommended for approval. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and we would ask for your approval.
As Mr. Box indicates, the design of the preliminary plat is in conformance with subdivision regulations in accordance with their staff report and the underlying PUD requirements with which we just recommended approval on. Commissioner Hinkle, I'll turn it over to you.
Ready to make a move unless somebody else has something to say.
Well, I believe Ms. Smith wants to comment on this item, and I want to give her an opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I'd have the same reasons for the record I have for this, the same comments I have in PUD 1809 I have for this C7274. In particular, I do want to point out the fact that the platting for this is again allowing for smaller homes. When it was originally platted, if we're even going back to 2013 when the development master plan was put in place, these lots were larger. They were going to be putting in larger homes. I do again make the arguments that for the reasons I've stated, that the builder should not be allowed to put in a completely different type of home that is in the neighborhood existing. And also, I don't want to restate myself because I think my statements say that I do think it's within your authority to amend or modify preliminary plats and ask for them to modify that or amend that. And then I request that this commission do that in this case with regard to those plats or platting that's going to affect the, and me specifically, as well as my neighbors on 138th. According to what I see here, the existing plats on existing R1, which are 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5, are almost 2 lots in one for the lots to the north, which are my home and my neighbors' homes. As well as the platting for the existing R-1ZL, the lot number 1. As that's depicted, I've verified with Mr. Box that that house will be facing east, so the backyard will be facing my side of my front yard, facing my front yard because my house runs north and south. So it will, one, have a fence line that runs across the front of my front yard, which I've never seen before. And I've never seen a house back up to a side of a house. And I certainly would have not moved into a neighborhood that was going to be the case. I purchased my lot because it was lot 1 and I was told it was not going to be developed and was going to stay that way. So again, for these reasons, I think it's within your authority to modify and amend plats, also to maintain the wooded area that is south of both my home as well as lots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 21, all of them existing homes that are currently there right now.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. Just to respond to that, just again for the purpose of the record, and then I will ask commissioners if they have any suggestions given the plat that's presented. It is within our purview to modify plats. We are told that this plat does conform with the subdivision regulations as they relate to lots, subdivisions between 31 and 100 lots. So I'll ask if there's any modifications that any commissioners see that they'd like to make that would be appropriate here. If so, feel free to do that at this time.
This Commissioner Powers, I wanted to ask Mr. Box, I mean, is there an opportunity there to, although the lot number 1 in block, I don't know, what is that, 17, appears to me to be fairly large. If I understood correctly, that was what she was concerned about. Well, that's existing.
Yeah, I think she is. I mean, so I would start by saying the lot she's specifically talking about, 1, is already zoned R1ZL. It was not part of the application we just considered. With respect to that, though, Cindy, could you display the exhibit that I sent you for this item? We can turn. I emailed it to you today, Cindy. It was a just in case. Well, anyway, Ms. Powers, that specific lot that is immediately to the east of Ms. Smith, we can convert it to, I think, basically 2 lots and turn them north and south so that they are oriented in the same manner that her lot is. Kendall, can you confirm that?
That's correct. For the record, Kendall Dillon, 300 Point Parkway, Yukon, Crafton Toll. But yes, we've already got a revised drawing where we basically just take the back lot line of the existing lots, extend it over to the east of the street, and then turn the 2 lots to face on to 138th Street. So that way she's not got a backyard siding into her.
I like that solution.
That's agreeable.
We're happy to do that.
Anybody have any objections to that? Okay, hearing none, the applicant's made the commitment to do it. So I guess, is there anything formally that we need to do, staff, to modify that as we move the application? Sounds like toward an approval. There it is. There's an exhibit showing it.
Yes, that's good. I mean,
Okay.
this is just a preliminary plat, so we
Sure.
just need to put a big X on that and make sure it comes back to us that way at final.
Okay, we'll just confirm for the record, Mr. Box, that the plat that is being shown to us presently on the screen is the plat you're committing to move forward. You agreement with that?
Hold on 1 second. Yeah.
It's the plat showing the 2 lots, 1 and 2, facing 138.
Yeah, I'm driving up by 35 now, so I need to look. Yes,
it's correct.
It's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Okay. Any other suggestions that planning commissioners have on the plat for adjustment? Okay, hearing none, I think we're ready for a motion, Mr. Hinkle.
Approval on the item with the moving of lots 1 and 2 to where they run north and south.
As displayed, agreed. Okay, I have a motion and I'll wait to see if I have a second. I have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat for C-7274. Please cast your votes. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes, please.
And for the benefit, again, as I said, for the batch plant, Ms. Smith and Mr. Lopez, the preliminary plat we have approved here, the zoning application that we recommended approval on will continue to City Council. Certainly, please feel free to voice your concerns there during that part of the process. If you believe that's necessary, that certainly you're welcome to do that. So with that application is approved unanimously. That is the last item on the agenda for today for items under separate consideration. The rest of our items were continued to later meetings. So that moves us into our additional items for today. Start with Planning Commission committees. We don't have any formal committees now, so we'll move to Planning Commission members. Commissioner Claire?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Powers?
Not very specifically, other than just, I think that it would be a good idea for each of the commissioners to keep a little note of items that they think would benefit from those kind of informal discussions that were twice mentioned today. And at some point, to share those with other commissioners and just in a very preliminary way as I did, and, get into staff's brain to start thinking about how they might be combined, as our chairman was suggesting today, and thinking about, ways that we can do that. I'm really very much in favor of us having the opportunity, and it is constrained by open meeting rules. We can't just get together for drinks and, hash this kind of stuff out. But even if it's noticed, and even if it has to be in the Embark meeting room, I do think that there is a certain informality in the study sessions and so on, that it's beneficial to us as a commission to be able to discuss some of these things without the pressure of a particular application pushing it one way or the other. So
I totally agree, 100%. Probably the right way to do that, Commissioner Powers, would be, to your point, if you have something that you think we need to spend some time on as a commission, and I don't mean to put this, put this burden on staff, but we can't do it collectively, as Commissioner Powers points out, because we can't communicate openly and collectively via email. But what we should do is email staff suggestions on topics we want to discuss and visit about. Then staff can send it out to everybody to say, is this something that you'd want to discuss more? And it's we can prioritize these things by the number of people who take interest in wanting to discuss them. Probably be the best way to do it. If this were at my office, I'd just send out a doodle and see what everybody wanted to do, a calendar, a voting system, and see what everybody wanted to do. But send your comment to staff, send your thought to staff of things to discuss, and let's try to prioritize what topics we need to get to and when we might be able to get to those topics. And if we can group a couple of them together, so be it. But I'm certainly open to that. I think it's a great idea. Anything else, Commissioner Powers?
no, that's fine. Thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Coffey?
Just one thing on the bylaws that were sent out. On my copy, there was nothing redlined. Anybody else have that problem, or?
Yes. I'm glad you brought it up.
I think it might be how you're viewing the PDF.
If I tell you what, I'll make it easy. Sarah Welch and Jeff Butler, I believe the last iteration of those red lines came from your office. If you could circulate the last modified draft in a Word document to the commissioners, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, we'll check that out. I don't recall if that was a PDF or a Word or what it was that we sent out, but if it helped, we could send out both.
Yeah, I believe it was a Word document. So just double check that when you're viewing it, it's showing changes.
You have to enable it. Yep.
But I'll resend it.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Coffey. Commissioner Privet?
Good. I was able to see all the updates on it, but yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Hinkle?
I really wish there was a way we could tell all of the city buyer beware. And I agree with everything that was said today. Thank you, Kamal, so much for voicing that, because we are the bad guys all the time, when if you'd have just paid attention, you'd have paid attention. But really, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that our friend Mark Ruffin was in bad shape, and he passed last week, and Oklahoma City lost a huge part of the development community. So keep their family in your prayers, please.
Yeah, great comments. Mark was a great guy, did a lot of things that were a lot of thankless jobs and roles, that's for sure. So yeah, he'll be missed by more than his family. Commissioner Highsmith?
Nothing new from me yet.
Okay. Commissioner Pennington?
I think the one thing I do want to add to all of this discussion, love all of that Commissioner Powers suggested with getting together. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think what needs to be a part of this discussion, I just wanted to make this point, I needed to do it away from, the item that we previously had. Go travel to my neighborhood of Lincoln Terrace, travel to Mesta, travel to Heritage, travel and see the variety of home offerings that are in these places that are of high value. And I think the housing variety is a good thing. Density can still be a good thing if you do it the right way. And I think there has to be something needs to be done about the way that we inform the public about this constant resistance. I mean, these people think that we've ruined their lives and the use of their home for we're simply adding a few more feet, of smaller lot sizes. And I think that is it's just so unfortunate that there's so much fear and misinformation out there that we can't even operate as a commission because of that. And so I think something needs to be done with how we inform the public about the importance of housing variety and the importance of density. And I also think what needs to be a part of this discussion group is this city's sprawl. We're still talking about Southwest 138th Street. That is a far crawl from downtown Oklahoma City. I think we really do need to address these sprawl issues and some of the things that Commissioner Cravens brought up, that article about the city's efforts to try to de-annex and other efforts. I think we really need to spend some time on it. It's crucial. So long-winded comment, but thank you.
No, you're fine, man. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Before I call on Commissioner LaForge, Cindy Lakin, you have your hand up. Do you have something you want to add to Commissioner Pennington or what was Commissioner Hinkle's comments?
Not to their comments. I just wanted to, Kara Smith has sent 2 questions in about what about the wooded area and wants to address the revised plat. So I didn't know if we should listen to her and citizens be heard.
I saw those. Those comments were addressed during our discussion, and given the time that those comments were posted, I don't know if they just came in late. But I mean, we addressed those issues when we had the discussion. So.
Okay, I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Commissioner LaForge?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Yeah. So a couple things. I would like to, please review those bylaws so we can get that done. That's something that's needed to happen for a long, long time. If you want to know why, just go look at our current ones. We need to get those updated. And one thing, Commissioner Pennington, I would tell you, it really stinks. You're right that we have to look insensitive and careless. And I remember when one of my neighbors came after I voted to approve the duplex next to our neighborhood, and she told me that I had destroyed her home and her property value and, this and that and the other. And that was, of course, face to face, which is even more awkward. I'll have you know that woman sold her house this past year for more money than she could have ever gotten. And those duplexes had no impact on the development or our neighborhood in any way, shape, or form, and they never will. And the real issue there is that it's just fallacy that people believe that and they get it in their mind. But there are certain things that you are absolutely right about, and we don't have the authority to fix them. But I remember when I was on the Board of Adjustment, I know Commissioner Privet probably appreciates this. I know Commissioner Powers certainly does because I served with her. People would come in all the time on HP issues, and they would say, we didn't know all these things. And I told Katie Friddle this. I said this on multiple occasions in those meetings. A state law should be passed to require, just like when you get a copy of your CC&Rs, your covenants, codes, and restrictions, when you like for an HOA, you should get a copy of the current HOA guidelines and rules at your closing. You should get a copy of that. That's got to come from the state. The other thing that the state could require, the state could require title companies to produce zoning maps that could be given to you at closing. That could be a requirement of closing. We can't fix that. But what is really frustrating, and I'm empathetic to people, but OKC.gov has a zoning map. If there is a vacant piece of property next to you, you better know what it is. You better know what it is. Go look it up. And that's, I think, really frustrating is there's not a mechanism for us to push that out because we're not the right governmental entity. But there are things that I think could be done and need to be done to better notice the public about what they're buying, where they're buying, and what impacts them. I just don't know who we take that to, but I agree with you 100%. The HP thing was a big frustration, for me anyway. So,
Maybe
and-
we should form a legislative subcommittee. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think it's very unfortunate that people who believe that they've done. We heard people say today they asked all the right questions. People who believe they've done due diligence, but in a reality haven't done like the thing that you learn on day one of Property 101 in law school, which is things that people tell you out loud. Do not control your written contractual arrangement when they sell you property. The fact that
Amen.
somebody tells you that will never be rezoned, I mean, that's just nonsense, whether it's vacant or whether it's developed,
Yeah, and the reality is, and you're right, and I believe, I'm not directing this comment specifically at Home Creations, but I know there are instances where that's been true, right? But there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
We can't do anything about that. So,
Commissioner Craven,
oh, go ahead.
you and I both know who we can talk to about this. I mean, all the state bills have been, they're already getting voted on right now, so there's nothing new coming in this year, but we could easily have this pinned and put in front of the legislator next year easily, to where you're alerting.
You know what, Matt? I think you and Janice are the foundation of our legislative committee.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, Janice, you're up.
That's what you get when you complain, right?
Schools committee. So
I understand. No, and I'd be happy to take it on. I think there are any number of things that we might like to see. The city actually has their own legislative liaison we might want to consult, but there are any number of things that I think might be very helpful if it's only therapeutic for us. I don't know.
Well, look, let's take a page out of the school committee book. What we could do as a planning commission that we could actually have some impact on is we can take all this feedback we're getting and we're hearing and we've heard. I mean, your time on the commission, Janice, is incredibly valuable in that you have years and years and years of hearing these comments from the public. And let's take that to the city's legislative liaison. You guys meet as a group, gather that information up to concern and see what they've been doing, so that if nothing else, what gets back to the planning commission that we can relay to public when we have these meetings is what's been tried in the past, what's been discussed, what things might be going through the legislative pipeline. Maybe that's the value that we create, because that's something that we can actually have influence on. I think that's probably where our influence ends, but if you guys want to lead that discussion with the city's lobbyists and liaisons, I think that's a great idea.
And
all for it.
Senator Racino is a realtor. He could author the bill.
Yeah. Jared Martin you said you had a comment you wanted to make. Did you want to interject now?
I was just going to add to, and it really kind of goes along with what Janice said, is like when you said knowing what's next to you is very important. The residents need to understand that, but they also need to understand that it can change, which goes along with what Janice was saying. I think people get this idea that, oh, that's zoned for this and it'll never change. I just don't think people understand that process, and that's somehow something we need to fix.
I totally agree. You never want residents to feel like they didn't have good information when they made a decision like purchasing a home. But again, we can't control all these things. I mean, we just can't, and we can't listen to hearsay from one side or the other, so it just makes it really, really tough.
It's not a court of law. We're a recommending body, and we recommend on development issues.
That's right.
Specific to really our ordinances, and this idea of compatibility, which I think, to me, it's the question of what is truly compatible next to another. And we've separated things out with zoning to such a degree that is now how people understand it, versus the way that we have historically developed as just human beings in a human environment. And that's why our historic neighborhoods, as we all continue to point out, have this mix of home sizes. It's really zoning that has created the issue itself. Like zoning itself has created the issue, which is,
and I do think it's unfortunate. There is so little real understanding among the average citizen of what zoning is and how it works. I was tempted today, although I didn't want to add another minute to that discussion, to point out to our protestants that for us as a planning commission, the difference between one kind of single family residential and another kind of single family residential, which is what the difference between R1 and R1ZL comes down to, is so negligible that the idea that we would be, causing some kind of problem for neighbors as between those two choices, I mean, that's not really even, a thought process that requires entering into from our standpoint. And you're talking about the difference between our single family and industrial. Now that's a difference,
Yeah, that was, and I'm not sure that I made this clearly at the time or in the moment, but that was my real concern, Janice, is you deny an R1ZL application on what grounds? What objective grounds could you deny that application? And then, of course, we're just recommending, but just assume that it goes to the city council and gets denied. I mean, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen for the city, period. I mean, because there's nothing else you can put there. You're essentially denying productive use of the property. I mean, there's an argument, I guess you could come back and make them do, R1 without R1ZL, but their only way to get to it is through the R1ZL that's already zoned. So now you're going to put R1, well, that is less desirable, in my opinion, than what they did. To me, they took the best of a bad set of circumstances, Anyway, it's tough, but I agree with you 100%. So, planning department.
Yeah, we already mentioned the bylaws. That study session is coming up.
When is that study session, Jeff?
Actually, so it's coming up.
Okay.
Can everyone attend on March 25th virtually?
I can.
Okay. We can put together a presentation that just kind of compares, or would you rather have just kind of a roundtable? What's the commission's thoughts on that?
I think the purpose of circulating them in advance, we've lost some of that time for some folks, but the purpose was to let everybody kind of gather their own thoughts. And so we're coming into an active discussion. I thought it would be helpful for them to see staff's comments. So they're sort of we've already advanced that discussion to a certain extent, right? So I'm hoping we can come in and everybody kind of has their thoughts prepared and has reviewed them. So in one study session, we could really knock it out and then get a draft together that we could start the process of cycling through the planning commission meetings.
Okay, well, it'll be more of a working meeting then.
Yeah. Anybody disagree with that or feel differently? Okay.
Yeah. It's just regarding the open space and the discussion that was had a second ago. My thoughts are there's clearly a demand. People want open space and they want it in their neighborhoods. But for whatever reason, developers around these parts they're not doing cluster subdivisions. There are ways that have been around for decades to reserve land and have it in common ownership or give it to a land trust or any number of different legal mechanisms to lock that land up forever, so that people don't have this problem. Well, I really like that idea of having some state legislation. Although there are when you go do your closing, there's a stack of papers, and all this information. You would still hope that that requirement would help people understand. Don't trust anything anybody says about what may or may not happen to a piece of land. If you want it to be open space, it better be in common ownership. It better be locked up legally, and here are the ways you can do it. Otherwise, it's fair game. And even if a developer or somebody thinks that they're not going to develop it, that could change at any time. Plans change, and there's that's not necessarily, there's maybe nothing dishonest about it. Ownership changes and plans change. So anyway, my point was just to say, we planning would be happy to and want to and intend to look into this idea of cluster development and open space preservation and making that easier to do legally, so you can lock up a piece of land and you know that it will always be open space. So there's that. And then the other thing, just to point out, we've got another code update meeting, the stakeholder advisory team tomorrow, for those of you that are involved. And just for your information, for those of you that are not, we're kind of starting that up. I was about to say again, but previously it was more of it was sign code. We're going to start in earnest now, getting into the guts of the code, the meat of the code, I should say, which is actual zoning. So we're getting that started, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow. And it's a process, and we're going to involve all of you, the stakeholder advisory team, developers, neighborhoods, through many different methods, focus groups, etc. And we'll be rolling out more information. So just for your information, and that's all I've got.
That's great. Jeff, on the, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. What was the last thing you said?
About the code update meeting?
Thank you. Just FYI, I've got a client obligation that came up, so I'll be late to that meeting, but I will join. I'll just be about 45 minutes late.
Okay.
So just FYI.
Can I piggyback to say something also from planning?
Sure.
So today is March 11th. 1 year ago was the Thunder game.
Yep.
So I just want to say thank you to the commission for your flexibility and figuring this all new technology out with us. And a big shout out to Cindy and to Paula, because without them, we could not have these meetings. They figured all this out. And IT and PIO, everybody for helping us get through this. And then as you move on to JJ, in the midst of all that, Cindy, Thad, Paula, those guys, they've really made some really great improvements on our website. And so I was gonna remind JJ to mention that also.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I know that everybody does. We greatly appreciate, all the work that particularly the staff does to make these meetings possible. There's nothing easy about these meetings. They're impersonal, they're cold, they're disheveled. There's a lot more anxiety in my view. I'd rather be sitting up on the horseshoe by myself having the meeting than like this, because you never know if somebody can't get their phone off mute or whatever. It's been a crazy year. And I started to say something at the beginning of the meeting and I just decided not to, but I cannot believe it was a year ago when essentially the world stopped, and it started here. And all the people that have been affected, Matt mentioned Mark Ruffin, but there's been a lot of people who have suffered, people who've had family members who have gotten sick, who've died, who and all the things of trying to get through these meetings and get through taking care of business has been a super big challenge, I think, for everybody. So if you've lost somebody close to you or you've been affected by it, it's a time to sort of reflect. I hope that it's also a time that, unlike last March 11th, we can look forward to better, brighter, and happier days. I look forward to being able to meet with you guys in person again, because this is not any fun.
Billy.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. JJ?
Yeah, just briefly. You'll recall a few months ago, we brought forward a proposed ordinance amendment at the request of City Council to require us to put all the proposed uses of any zoning district and PUD in our mailed notices. And both staff and Planning Commission found that that's a bit problematic. And you suggested that what we do maybe is look at doing something with our website or electronically. And Thad Johnson on our staff grabbed that and moved forward with it. And we have implemented that. It's a very short, simple URL that's going to be added to the notices. And it takes you to our website and it lists all the permitted uses of any zoning district.
Oh, that's wonderful.
All of the PUD documents. So that we put that in to effect with this last batch of notices that just went out. So.
That's awesome, JJ.
Great. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Thad, for your work on that. That's great. I hope people will use that.
Well, we've got probably the simplest URL we could get. You know, it's not a mile long. It's just okc.gov/districts. So that's all they have to type in to find it. So.
Okay, that's
It's a good
great.
deal.
Yeah, thank you for that. Municipal Counselor's Office?
No, sir.
I knew you were going to say that, Dan. Dan, next meeting, I want comments from the Municipal Counselor's Office.
Yes, sir. Susan will be glad to do that.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm sure you're saying that because Susan will be here next time. Citizens to be heard. I've got, looks like Kara Smith has her hand raised. Hang on a second, I think.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is Kara Smith. I just wanted to say that I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be heard today. But I did want to say that I stayed on, and when I listened to the agenda and it listed under Planning Commission members discussion, and you guys were talking, it was under communications and reports. I do have some observations that I would like to share with you about some things I felt were inappropriate that were stated by commissioners. I understand that there is a conversation to be had, but I don't think it's appropriate under the agenda item that you listed it. And I also don't think it's appropriate to speak to citizens who are taxpayers of this city for you to call ridiculous, and it doesn't make you don't understand. I think if there is a process for citizens and residents to protest and oppose, those oppositions should be respected. And comments should not be entered on the record that they're ridiculous. Because I am a homeowner, and if I have a protest or opposition, I have every right to do so. And it should not be viewed by the commissioners. You're supposed to be a neutral and impartial decision maker. And comments regarding ridiculous are making assertions about a person that you should not be making as a public servant. So I feel like the comments that were made by some of the commissioners were inappropriate and should not have ever been put on the record because this is being recorded. This is being broadcasted. And as a resident and as a citizen, I don't appreciate that. And so I think that when speaking about things have been presented in public hearings, those statements should be left there and technically probably are not appropriate. And you might check with your municipal counselor about discussing them under communications and reports. And additionally, especially commenting in a negative way about a citizen who's opposed and went through the hearing process. That's all I really have to say.
Ms. Smith, we appreciate that. Planning commissioners during additional items or communications can talk about anything they want to. There's nothing that precludes them from doing that. The item's already been settled. If we choose to reflect on that or talk about issues, using it as an example for a global policy problem or something that we think we need to talk about as a larger group, that's certainly the place to do it. It would not be appropriate to have that conversation under an item when typically we have people who are sitting on wooden pews and have another item they want to be heard. We respect every citizen's comments, but it becomes very challenging to, number one, we take it in, but once we've heard it, we've heard it. We heard you. We understood what the concern was, and it's not the first time we've heard it. And if that seems sort of unprofessional or not, us not being respectful of that, it's not. I think what you're really getting from us is a real sense of frustration, because if you stayed on and you've listened to the rest of our comments, it's that we simply don't have what we need to resolve those issues. We don't have that power. And so within our limited, extremely limited scope, which I think we very effectively stayed within today, quite frankly, we have to hear these cases and we have to keep everybody focused on the things that are actually before us. And on a rezoning matter, those things are not what necessarily members of the public or neighbors would want us to listen to. So it's a delicate balance. I will just apologize to you, I don't know if it was me or someone else, but if I said something that you took offense to, I certainly apologize. I think that what I would echo to you is these meetings are really hard. Normally, I can look at you and I can see things that are going on and we're in the same room and it's much more personal. These meetings are super challenging and they're challenging on everybody. So I apologize if you were offended today. If I said something that offended you, I apologize on behalf of the commission if you felt that way. But I don't agree with you that what we talked about in our communications and reports is inappropriate at all. But I do appreciate you sharing your thoughts on maybe us not being respectful enough as we should, and I'll certainly take that to heart.
I don't want to be on the point, and I think you said this very well, Scott, but I would also remind Mrs. Smith that we're humans as well. We also feel the pressure and the stress of these meetings, and this is not to start a tit for tat, but I would remind you of something that, like, to me was offensive in this meeting, which was when your co-protestant, Mr. Lopez, accused this body blanketly as corrupt before he terminated his communication. So I believe you also endorsed his comments. I'm not, I don't hold you to that. I don't mean that to be to push that negativity, but it goes both directions. We're doing our best up here. This is not a compensated position. We do this just to serve the city, and we try to do it as professionally as we can. I too will apologize if anything came off wrong. I would say that I'm very serious about being available to you and any other citizen to have a long form discussion about zoning and about the issues that we talked about today. Legitimately, if you want to talk further about this, please reach out to staff and get my contact and give me a shout. I'm 100% dead serious about that. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, I think you want to respond to that. I'll give you the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to be clear, the comments I were referring to is one of the commissioners, I believe it was Janice Powers, who called them ridiculous or protest. And what I mean by taking and respecting them, no citizen should be told they're ridiculous when they go through the process. And so I understand you're humans and you're public servants, but you are serving in a public servant role, and you have to be very cautious about that. And the things that are said on the record should be very cautious as well. And so I can completely understand you're human beings. And when I endorse Mr. Lopez's comments, his concerns about his assertions, it was about his reasonings for why the plat should not be applied. So just to clarify that, I did not vouch for his statement as to any corruption argument. So just that's clear on the record so that that's not a misunderstanding as for the record is concerned. But what I am referring to is when it would be fine if the discussion was tailored to neutral commentary, but when you specifically address opposition by citizens and call them ridiculous, that is the problem. And that is difficult for everyone involved. And so that's the kind of comment that's just not necessary on the record. You can have whatever internal understandings or feelings about it you may have, just like I can have the same understandings or feelings about it that I want to have, but to say them, I've been completely respectful in my presentation. And that is what I would expect from you.
Ms. Smith, this is Janice Powers. If I said anything that gave you the impression that I thought you or anyone else who appeared in front of us today was ridiculous, I certainly did not mean to do that. I'll have to go back and listen to the tape later and see what it was that I said. I am certainly a person who believes that it's very, very important for us to respect each and every person who takes the time and effort to appear in front of us, whether it's sitting on those hard benches or this even much more for me, challenging technological appearance. But again, I'll have to go back and listen to the tape to hear what it was that I was referring to. But I want to assure you that it was not you or any other human being that I was calling ridiculous. And if you took offense to what I said, I'm very, very sorry.
I'll leave it here. I don't know anybody on this commission that is more concerned about how people feel when they come or about issues affecting neighborhoods than you, Commissioner Powers. So frankly, you've formed a lot of my opinions in that regard and have always been respectful. I didn't take anything you said today to be directed at anyone specifically, more conceptually about the issues that we have to deal with. So I'll leave it there.
They all got to say their 2 cents.
I believe that's all we have. Is there any other business? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion to second. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. I wish everybody a wonderful Friday and weekend.
Same.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yep.